See if that works. Okay, I think we might be live in. Hey, okay, Kazra, we are live finally.
Hey there, we live? How do
Yay!
you know?
See how we're sitting here. Apologies for that. We're having technical stuff. I'm happy to see that we made it. So let's jump straight into it, shall we?
Shall we? Shall we? Let's
I
absolutely go.
I think we shall. So I'm really excited about this conversation because one of the things that I speak about a lot when it comes to leadership is what happens when things get really difficult, they get really rough. We face challenges that a lot of people just fear. I think, especially in entrepreneurship, a lot of people are scared to get into it because there's a lot of uncertainty. They don't know what they're going to face. And then what happens when the bad stuff happens? How do you act with it, right? And I think just it's such an inspirational story that you have because you're an example of an entrepreneur that faces a lot of difficulty in a way that I know very few people who reaches this level of difficulty, this level of pushback, this level of having to fight and continue to be in the fight. So before I get into too many questions around that, would you give us some background information just to let people know who you are, what you do, and maybe a bit of background on also what you're going through?
Okay. Well, thank you for having me here. Always lovely to talk to you.
Mhm.
Khaazra Maaranu is my name, and I've been in just personally. I don't know. People don't care about my personal life, but I've been in the payment processing space for I don't know 15 years or so now. Started off literally door to door in the what they call merchant services or the credit card processing space, and didn't know anything about it. Started off door to door sales. Let me take a step back. I was looking for something better than what I currently had, which I was working at an elementary school in Orlando, Florida. I had worked in at Wall Street before that in New Jersey. I would travel every day from New Jersey all the way to New York on the PATH train. You probably don't know what that is, but I would travel on the PATH train. It's my train. That's why I'm gonna call him back. I would travel on the PATH trains. My journey right now, literally speak, I say right back. So, and that's an everyday occurrence all day. And I would actually I would I used to work at Goldman Sachs, right, which is a premier investment banking firm. And the way I would get there, PATH train to, I forget the name of the other train, right through the World Trade Center. And then I would walk 1 or 2 blocks over to Goldman Sachs. I worked at the Federal Reserve Bank, I worked at Goldman Sachs. And I was in school at Rutgers University at the time, I believe, and it was the summer of 9/11, and I graduated. And instead of, I had worked there for like 2 years, and instead of going to work, I quit to move to Florida. And it's so crazy because 2 months after that is when the World Trade Center bombing happened. And that I would have absolutely been there that day in the World Trade Center. That was the exact time that I would get there from New Jersey and walk over. So, just things happen for a reason, right? And so I went to move to Orlando, Florida, and I began working at an elementary school called Ivory Elementary School. And I had to start from the bottom because, especially at that time, there's like no financial sector here in Orlando, Florida. And so this preacher who I just happened to come across offered me a volunteer job at an elementary school in probably the only project area that Orlando, Florida has. Volunteer to help in the after school program, passing out candy and bags and basketballs and just like super duper. I don't want to say low level, but it's not high skill work. And so I did that. I guess they saw the sparkle in my eyes, and I eventually began to move up from there. And I began to work for the elementary school as an aide to a substitute teacher. And then some other kind of title they made up. But then I became a technology coordinator at the school, making at the most $38,000 per year in salary before taxes. And then it was okay. It was a step down from what I had been making, but I wanted something more. I wanted more time. I wanted more access to my family. And I went online and I found merchant services and I saw all the money they were making. And I flew out there and did this training. And I became the best salesperson they had, blah, 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 blah. And then I saw something that just didn't gel with my ethics. And so I had to quit. I had to walk away from about, at that time, I think it was like maybe 16, $20,000 a month, which is like crazy money for me at that time. And I had to walk away from that because I wasn't with the program, right? I won't say the name of the company, but super duper unethical. And the company was highly rewarded by banks and by processing companies. They would get awards every year, but they were extremely unethical, constant lawsuits, constant issues, and just everything about the way they taught us was super duper unethical. Um, and so I found a situation where I began working with a guy who used to work there as well. He had already quit before I came there, and we started our own entity, right? And that's when I left the elementary school. I quit or whatever, and we started our own entity at this particular elementary school. I'm sorry, I started our own entity up under our own kind of like payment processing company. We did that for about 5 or 6 years or so. And I mean, we were hustling, making tons and tons of sales, but our income was going backwards because we could never actually see how the money was being calculated. And we eventually left that and went to the highest level you can go in payment processing, which is what we are. It's called the FSP. And so we became an FSP up under a current sponsor bank. I won't say the name of that bank. And we did that for, say, 2017 till about 2022, right? When we started to actually scale and grow, we were doing $1 billion in sales every single year. And I mean, like, we had no issues. We didn't need anybody to come in and help us. We didn't need any loans. We didn't need any VCs, nothing. My ex partner came across some guys who sprinkled some dust on them and told him they were going to make him the Jeff Bezos of payment processing, some guys out of Southern California. And at that time, COVID hit. So travel restrictions were like super severe. So you couldn't travel as much. So I wasn't able to go to the office every week from Florida to California like I used to, like literally fly every single week, which is like a lot. And one thing led to another. Greed kicked in, and I had to sue my ex business partner, right? And this is not somebody you don't want to sue somebody who's the best man in your wedding, travel all over the world together. I would stay in his house when I would go out there, sometimes a hotel here and there, but mainly at his house. Like we literally built the business from the ground up to doing billions of dollars in sales every year. And this is not in an industry where you see a lot of us. This is really a good old boys network, like strictly speaking. And so we were able to do that, and just all this corruption and greed kicked in, millions of dollars going here, there, everywhere but my bank account. So eventually it turned into all these lawsuits. Our attorney, and I have to be careful how I say it, the attorney, certain legal firms took sides because, the money, and they started suing all of these clients, and it just became a super, like, oh my God, a huge freaking mess. And then our one of our bank partners, saw the opportunity to sort of like take it anyway. There's so much stuff with that, and it turned into probably 50, 60 lawsuits that I never started. I probably executed maybe two or three myself in that whole period. But it was, when I say it's just turmoil, oh man, it was just crazy. So anyway, so that's what led me to where we are today. We're no longer business partners. He's not associated with our current company today. But anyway, that's what leads us up to where we are today. When you start from the bottom and you go all the way up, right, to is, $1 billion in sales, over $1 billion in sales every single year in payment processing is not bad at all, especially for two black guys, right? And then you go just right? With legal fees and all kinds of stuff associated that you have no idea about. So anyway, that's where we are today.
That sounds like a lot. I mean, there's when you're just talking about billions of dollars in sales, and then you, as a payment processor, you take a couple of percentage in commission, right? Every time. How does that work?
Yeah, so whenever you process a payment, somebody's always getting paid. First of all, Visa, MasterCard, Amex, Discover, they get paid regardless.
Yeah.
You can't process directly with Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Discover, right? You have to go through a payment processing company because Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Discover, they're really just a consortium of banks that come up with fees for using their credit cards. Like Bank of America has their own fees. Chase has their own fees. Like every bank, Wells Fargo, they have their own fees of the credit cards that they issue. So this is kind of like what makes up, the card brands and the Visa. Let's look at Visa like a board or something like that that kind of oversees everything. So you have a payment processing platform, let's say a highway that you process on, but then you have the actual payment processing company who kind of processes your payments if you process to us. And so let's say if you process and your fee is 3%, there may be like a half a percent or even a percent markup on that. But we are the entities that make your processing possible when you take sales from your customers. And yes, we do make a percentage off of it, but we also hold the risk on it. So we can make money from your payment processing, but let's say you have chargebacks, you have fraud, we're on the hook for that as well. We can always go after you, and there's some legal repercussions to it, but that's a whole nother ball game. Chasing somebody for 10,000 or 5,000, even $1,000 may cost you $20,000. So there's a lot of risk involved as well.
Right. It just, when you're talking about billions of dollars, even 1 or 2 percentages of that is still a lot of money, right? It's those are big numbers.
It is. So
So
I can do the math for you. If you were doing, let's say if you were doing $1 billion,
Mhm.
right? And you were to make, let's just say 1.5% of that, that's $15 million right there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which,
minimum. So yeah,
yeah, which is, I mean, obviously then where you're talking about the peaks, you're making a lot of money, things are starting to be fun, and then but you're also dealing with the dark side of that. You're then dealing with your business partners. And I remember also you've been talking about how some of these banks and financial institutions also create issues, right? When you're a relatively small player, and this is what we're talking about today, is the David versus Goliath. How do you deal with it when a lot of the other players in the market are these really big dogs that can just keep putting resources into trying to take over your business? Or I mean, can you speak to that a little bit?
sure. So like I'm from Detroit, Michigan. So I grew up in the quote unquote the hood, the ghetto. Like Detroit is probably as hood as you can get. And I'm used to seeing things happen and then they're dealt with immediately. Like it's unfortunate, but when you deal with people who are impoverished, the way they handle things is immediate action in the most physical way possible, right? You walk into even if you think about it, if you go to a store, a grocery store, and matter of fact, I remember as a child, I went to a grocery store and I don't know what it was I bought. I think my auntie or somebody sent me to the grocery store and I went through the cash register and I saw some guy following me in the store. He had like sunglasses on or shades or whatever. And the cash register didn't bag it up. She didn't give me a receipt. She just, I was like freaking, I don't know, 12 maybe 13, something like that. And she said, just go, right? And as soon as I walked out the store, this freaking grown man like tackled me, right? Like literally tackled me. And it's crazy that that I'm even talking about this because I've never told anybody, right? But he tackled me and he like hemmed me up, like not he didn't like hog tie me, but he did something where he got my hands behind my back. I forget what he did. I don't know if he had twisters, but he was a grown man, right? I'm like this little scrawny little guy, and he took me and I told him, I said, man, I paid for this, and he didn't believe me, and he took me to the cash register and she's like, yeah, he paid for it, and he just let me go, right? And the reason I'm mentioning that is because that's immediate action in the most physical way. And I've seen, unfortunately, and heard of children and adults being handled on the spot for stealing a bag of chips, soda, damaging a car, or something like that. Like it's immediate action. Whereas when you're dealing with corporate America and financial crimes, there's no police that are going. They may show up and take a report, but they don't even understand what's happening. They have no clue. They're police officers. Look at them like nothing wrong with security guards, but they're there to that particular moment, and that's it, right? If there's a financial crime, you need sophistication, you need FBI, you need fencing, you need IRS, you need people who, auditors, people who can go and dig because it's so easy to manipulate. And here's the other thing, you need money. None of those people are going to show up for you. The FBI is not going to show up. Fencing's not going to show up unless you harm the government or something like that. But in most cases, they're not just going to show up because you stole a bag of Doritos or because you stole a tire or a hubcap or somebody's battery out of their car, right? They don't care. But with financial crimes, you have to now go and hire extremely expensive attorneys who may or may not even understand what's happening themselves. So they have to do all this research. And we're not talking about $200 an hour. We're talking about $700 an hour, $1,200 an hour. And they don't even know what's happening. And remind you, they have 10 other cases. You just won. So imagine having 10 women or 10 men. Like, how much energy can you give to one? You may even forget their name or their birthdays, right? There's so much, you know what I mean? There's so much happening, but you're still paying by the hour. So before you know it, you could be up to $50,000. I have a case, I gotta be careful how I say it. I had a case where I hired an attorney and he was super expensive. I think over 1,000 an hour, filing in the wrong state, like, oh my God, all kinds of stuff that I had to pay for. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Mm.
And then we get to a point where it's totally ineffective, don't really know what's happening, and he or she still wants to be paid. And they will drop you like a very bad habit in the event they can't get paid, right? They can't continue to get paid to learn your industry, to understand your industry, and to be effective about it. And then you also have to pay the courts. Like if you go to arbitration, you have to pay the legal, the courts. They got to get paid too. Like there's nothing free. So you're paying your attorney hundreds of thousands of dollars. You're paying the courts or the arbitrators sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then you have the opposition where they can just file whatever, right? As an example, let's say if I want to sue you today, this is just an example. I'm not saying this happened. Let's say if I want to sue you today, and I just want to like I want to cause problems for you. I will sue you for the most ludicrous BS I can think of, and then say you damaged me. Now it may be clear as day that it's BS, but you still have to defend yourself.
Mhm.
Like if I walked up to you and just slapped you five, six, 7 times, I could really cause some damage. In the way the legal system, my experience is that somebody could literally sue you like crazy, and if you don't do anything about it, you get a judgment against you, which they can collect on. So you have to defend yourself. You have to put your hands up and your arms up. And it's not putting your arms up in the street. You got to put some paper up, a whole bunch of paper, constantly, constantly. So if you're going against a Goliath who has way more resources than you, they have all these contracts. They may even have access to your money, right? Because we're not dealing with like cash in the corner or the street anymore. We're talking about electronic currency. So it's easy to get to your cash, right? It's very easy to get to your money. So yes, it can be. It's definitely a whole nother ball game of, I would say, scheming, lying, a ton of lying, right?
Mm.
Manipulating the system, abusing the system, and it's not to complain about. That's just really what it is, and you have to be able to navigate through that as a David. Now, case, yeah, you have to be able to, kind of get through that. Now, let's say if you were Jay Z or somebody like that with just like access to tons of money, somebody comes at you. Like if Jay Z didn't have the money that he had, they probably would have tore him down too, maybe a little bit. But he has access, he has capital, he has influence at the same time. So it's somewhat of a different ball game. But I mean, still, if they really wanted to get him, I guess they could. But he has money, so you have to have money when you're dealing with corporate crime. And you have to have blessings, you have to have people in your corner, because while you're going through all of that, you paying your attorneys hundreds of thousands of dollars. Some will be there with you for a moment, and then they'll say, "Hey, I can't keep learning anymore off of your dime." They'll just drop you, and they'll even come after you for the rest of the money, right? And you have they will. You have to understand, and I want to make this a teaching lesson too, that when you have an engagement letter with the law firm or an attorney, once that engagement letter is over, you have 1 year to make your wrongs or right, or to correct anything, or to come back and say, hey, I don't agree with this billing, or maybe you charge them incorrectly and there's legal malpractice or something like that, and you can then handle that in court. You have 1 year to do that. After that, it's a wrap. It doesn't matter what they've done. It could be incorrect. They could have done anything. The way the system works, in some of the experiences I've read about, then they can come after you for whatever else it is they want to come after you, and you can't hold them accountable for any errors or any mistakes. Imagine going to a doctor and he operates on you because you say, "Oh, I have I don't know." You say, "I have a headache," and they find out that you have a tumor in your brain. They put you to sleep on the right side of your brain. You have a tumor, and you wake up and you're like, "Man, I still have it." And they look and say, "Oh shoot, we operated on the wrong side of their brain, right? They took the left side of your brain out that was working properly." Now, imagine only having 1 year to go after them for that mistake, right? Only 1 year, and then they may say, "You know what? Hey, you didn't finish paying us for the this side that we were supposed to operate on. You still have to pay," and they can come after you and sue you for it. Whereas you're like, "Wait a minute, you made a mistake in the beginning." Like, oh, of course, oh, you only had 1 year to do it. So you have to kind of like really understand the game and have people who you can trust. And I am blessed to have had at my family, my wife in particular. I mean, like, wow, I have some legal teams, some legal people who have just really been in my corner, who are ethical. So it's not that all attorneys are like that, but there's a lot that are. But I've had some really fortunate to have some really good people in my corner. I've had access to resources, but you still have to think about your team, right? Because everybody wants to make more money. Everybody wants to make more money, right? Right. At the same time, when you have a financial institution strangling you, you have attorneys. There's a dog. You have
Yes.
attorneys filing attorney. I may sue you and cost you $50,000 in legal fees. You may only be suing me for 10,000, but I just counter sue you and run up your bill $100,000, right? That kind of stuff happens. So while I'm suing you, while you it's $10,000 that's owed, but now I'm costing you $50,000 in legal fees. While you're paying all of that, you're not really focusing on sales. You're not really focusing on marketing. You're not really focusing on the business because you're so strapped and focused on all this legal stuff that's super duper financially time and emotionally consuming to you. And it's extremely draining. At the same time, your staff are like, hey, we want to make extra money. And people in general, whether it be people, whether it be financial institutions in particular, when they see an opportunity to exploit, everybody does it. So not everybody. Some people have that kind of personality where a financial institution may say, "Oh, we see they're weak right now. Let's see how we can take advantage of that and take over." Right? That literally does happen. You may have some staff members that say, let's gather all the data that we possibly can so that we could use it for our own thing. We could use it for our own business, right? And they may actually steal your data or hold your data hostage for their own purpose and benefit. But then, and they have limited resources, but they can still affect you in some kind of way while you focus on all this other legal stuff. And then you have the financial institutions who are absolutely focused on how can they take advantage of the opportunity, literally by taking your business away from you, by harming your clients that will, of course, cause attrition and cause all kinds of other problems. Then you have the person that you're suing also trying to cause harm and attack you at the same time. So anyway, I don't want to make this sound like gloom and doom, but these are just some of the things that I've read about that can happen when you're in this kind of experience.
So it sounds
Hope I-
it all sounds like a lot, right? And it's kind of interesting that you're mentioning this case about how they will just keep suing you for ridiculous things, because my partner, he had an American business partner, and when they ended their partnership, he did exactly that. The American, he did exactly that. Kept just
What?
here in Rwanda, he just kept opening the most ridiculous cases, And then
Our country?
yeah, and my partner had to pay a lawyer every time to just close it because it's like this is ridiculous. And he ended up spending a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of just like you said, it's an emotional toll, right? So I've experienced firsthand because it was stressful for me as well because I was on the sidelines seeing all of this happening and then trying to be the emotional support. But I was like, I need an emotional support, being the emotional support in this, right? It ended up being very, very stressful because you just keep having to be shown up in court for the most ridiculous things and then paying to have it closed and for the judge to say, why are we even here? This is ridiculous. But
Well,
what I'm saying is
I
that
love
I've experienced a tiny, tiny bit of what you're going through, and that was a lot. On me, on my partner, was a lot, right? A lot of emotion took a long over the course of years. It was incredibly stressful. And what you're experiencing, what you have experienced, and what you've so-called read about has been so much more than that, right? And it's been so much bigger stakes. And it's been, like you say, someone sees that you're down and they decide this is the moment to attack, which just sounds so ruthless and cold to me. So my question is really, how and why do you keep going? I mean, haven't you been tempted to just shut it down and do something else?
it. It has crossed my mind. So it's really not even just about me. You have staff members that rely on the income coming in. They have families at the same time. You have sales reps. I'll give you an example. I read about this financial institution that that held 100% of this company's money for a whole year. 100%. So let's say you have a contract with the telephone company. So you have staff members who get paid based upon the income that your company makes, but you have contracts that come through the company. But let's say you bank with Chase Bank and all your money goes to Chase, but Chase decides that let's hold on to this money because we like the business that you have. We know if we hold on to the money, how are you going to make your payroll for your staff? How are you going to make your payroll for your sales team? How are you going to make your payroll for your mandatory vendor fees that you have to pay? Right?
Pay your clients,
So,
right?
huh?
And pay your clients, right? Because you're holding the money too, right? Or hypothetically,
Well,
this
well,
person.
no. Well, no. But maybe not hold that part of it because otherwise all the income would stop.
Mm.
Right? Remember, the money's going to the bank, so they're not going to cut that part off. The money's going to Chase. They won't cut that part off, but it has to come to you in order so that you can help fulfill your obligations to your clients. They may need refunds, but you're not even getting the money to refund them. They may need systems. They may need updates. They may just all kinds of things. And then you have staff who have worked. So I read about a guy who, for a whole year, he had to finance hundreds of millions of dollars in payroll himself, vendor fees himself, because that particular bank was holding 100% of the income. So, do you want to just say, you know what, forget it? And mind you, the thing that I read about or heard about, imagine that same situation. You still have contracts with these other vendors that you work with. So how will they get paid? Let's say if you just say forget about it, then now everything collapses on you. You have because you have signed agreements. Your name is on the hook for everything.
Mm.
So what happens when you just stop? Then now you have to deal with more legal stuff, right? So you kind of have to keep going in certain in many regards. You have to make the payroll. However, you have to make the payroll. You have to make sure your salespeople get paid at the same time. You have to make sure all the vendors get paid. And Chase is already. And we're just using Chase as an example. That particular bank, they're making money, right? Because the money's going to their bank account. So, do you want to quit? Yeah, absolutely. You want to quit even when you're at the gym. Sometimes you're like, I'm tired, but you know you need to keep going because you know that needs to help you to do one extra rep. But mentally speaking, you know you should kind of push through it. So I kind of look at it like I've always had challenges, maybe not to the extent that I've read about recently, yet some people are quitters and some people aren't, right? So I'm not necessarily, if I put myself in that position, I don't think I would just quit, right? So some people go all the way to the end, like all the way to. You just have people like that. I remember reading, you know who Fidel Castro is?
Yeah.
Okay, and you ever read the book?
No.
I think we spoke about this before, right? And yeah, he wrote a book, and either somebody wrote a book about him, and I remember when he said he was a child, he got into a fight by some bully, and the bully just beat him up. And he came back the next day and he beat him up again and again. But after a while, the bully was like, "Damn, like this guy just won't quit. I'm gonna have to like put Fidel out of his misery." And Fidel just kept coming back, kept coming back. So you have some people like that, and I think you really don't find out who you are. And I can't say that for everybody, but sometimes you don't really find out who you are until you have the most pressure, right? Until you're up under the most extreme pressure. I think that's when you get diamonds, they say, right? And I'm not saying that's healthy all the time to be in those kind of situations, but sometimes you really find out what you're made of, and it may take you through something that when you come out and you have more resolve, and you may get damaged in the process. I don't think anybody can be in fights all the time and not get damaged. Yet everybody has their path in life to go through. So to to answer your question, yeah, absolutely. I'm pretty sure you feel like quitting sometimes. Yeah, some people just don't. They would go on and on and on until it's resolved.
Do you think, have you always been
So
like that, or is that something that you develop? Is that a character trait that develops throughout life? What do you think made you be the kind of person that just sticks with it?
that's a really good question. Because I That's a really good question because I've never really been a fighting type of person. Never been a fighting. I don't pick fights. You have to really push my buttons to like make me like want to even retaliate against you. Like you have to really push my buttons. But I think sometimes you really don't know who you are until you're in the most extreme positions. And now I do know what kind of person I am. So I'm not the kind of person who's going to go pick a fight. I don't go look for fights. I don't start fires. But I think I am the kind of person who will put the fire out once it starts. That's where I learned who I am. So yeah, that's how I learned who I am. Yeah, I'm not the person who goes and look for fights. I'm not like some crazy mega millionaire with all the access to resources to just sue people and get involved in all this legal stuff. No kind of personality like that whatsoever. I'm a pretty easygoing guy, very peaceful guy, and trust me, you have to push me along to like the very end of the cliff. But once you have animals.
Yes.
What happens when your animal, your pet, gets in a corner?
Gets defensive, right?
Super defensive, right? So I think that's probably more so the situation than anything else. It's like once you put a person in the corner and they have nothing else to lose, that's probably a dangerous person.
Do you feel like you've
Yeah.
reached that point, or do you think there's still more to, there's still further to the cliff?
Well, I'm not. I see the cliff. I'm not going to let you push me there. So I don't want to get there, but I can see that's the mode. Yes. So am I the? And I had to learn. It's so interesting. I don't know if you can really know yourself until you put up under a certain amount of pressure.
Mm,
maybe that's just me saying that. So like, I play sports, and let's just say you go and play basketball recreationally, right? It's cool, it's fun, but when you really take basketball serious and you put in a position where like the other side, like they are going all out. They're playing extremely physical. They're playing dirty. Like nothing is fair. You have a decision where you can say, "Hey, listen, I'm gonna step away from that," or you take the challenge,
mm,
right? So I think some people, when you put them in that position, I think some people will take the challenge. It's not I don't have to take the challenge, but when you're cornered and you like treated like some rat or something like that in the corner, yeah, you can come out fighting for sure.
mm. So there's a lot of people I feel that are scared of this pressure, right? They haven't been in it yet. They're looking at it and they're thinking, I would do anything to avoid being in this position where I'm under so much pressure. But there's also something around once you've been in it and you see who you're becoming as a result of the pressure, you end up actually being thankful for the pressure. So when you're looking at the journey that you've been through, if you had known what was about to happen when you embarked on this journey, would you have still done it?
No, there's no way. No,
But you're
no
still
way.
I mean, you're still kind of recommending people to get into the industry, right? You're still saying, "Hey, this is a great lucrative business. You should definitely come play," right?
It's different levels. It's definitely different levels. So let's say when you're playing high school basketball, it's fun, right? You don't make any money from well, I guess you can do it like this now, but you don't really like play high school basketball to support your family. It's just a fun thing. And then you make it to the collegiate level, it's like, okay, wow, I have some opportunity here. Then you make it to the NBA, that's your livelihood, right? That is like if that's over, then some people don't even have anything else to fall back on. Of course, life is not over with. We don't have to jump off the cliff. Yet that's kind of how I look at it. And I think that's just, it's interesting you asked that question because I think we all we get to a point where we kind of find out what we're made of. And I think you're put in certain situations, it could be a test. Like it's more than just about these other entities, to be perfectly honest with you. Because you're testing yourself.
Mm,
And when you're going through this, okay, so I don't know how they do in other countries, but when you're in college, you go through like this pledge to join these, I guess, fraternities or whatever. And, or when you want to become a Mason, you can like, it's not even private information, you can read about it, but they like beat you and do all kind of crazy stuff, hazing you or whatever. I think you've seen the movie School Days where they take you through all this crazy stuff to or with like as a mason or something like that, you have to go through all this like trial and fire kind of thing, just like if you were to try out for a basketball team. It's like real, like you have to go through this whole process. So i kind of I kind of see it like you're going through this process, and it's like this testing period, and some people tap out, and then some people get through it, and you kind of see what you're made of. It's almost like going through a priesthood in my experience, right? You have to study, you go through all this trial and error, you have to discipline yourself, you have to deprive yourself, you go through all these different things. I think it's just a part of life and the journey that you're on.
mm,
And while you're going through that, it's not going to be perfect, right? You're going to see your weaknesses. You may even drop off and do something stupid that you shouldn't do,
mhm,
right? But this is part of your journey. um, you may be the kind of person who handles pressure very well. You may be the kind of person who starts drinking, smoking, um, living a lifestyle that you shouldn't live. There's like all kinds of things that happen on this journey, to be perfectly honest with you. But that's just part of the journey, right? And that's kind of how I see it, to be honest with you. It's just part of the journey, and you go through things just like if you were going to become a mason, or you go through these fraternities and they beat you and they kick you and you do all this crazy stuff, right? just to get the brand or whatever on your arm. I think everyone in life has to go through some kind of christening or some kind of ritual experience to get to a point where, not that you've made it, but you've at least passed that phase of life. Like, even if you want to be in a relationship with your significant other, it's not always going to be rosy. It's not always going to be great. There's going to be some disagreements, maybe some arguments. You may even break up. You may not see eye to eye. There's like all these like different temptations that happen, like all these different things. And then if you can get through that, right, then you get to the next level, right, which could be a lot better. Then you get to the next level and the next level. So that's kind of how I see it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Every single challenge is it's almost designed to help us do something else in the future, right? I see it so often that sometimes I go through something and I don't understand why am I supposed to go through this. And then later in
Hmm.
life, it's like, oh, now it makes sense because I developed the skills back then that I need to handle the situation now and handle a lot better. But I'm one thing that you mentioned, you're talking about like a lot of people they use drugs, alcohol, other sorts of stimulations to handle this pressure. So how do you, because you're under a lot of pressure sometimes, right? It's a lot. How do you deal with pressure?
Ooh, that's a good one. Um, I
You knew who you're talking to when you agreed to this chat.
know, right? Yeah. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I haven't always dealt with it in the best way. And you
Mm,
have to kind of catch yourself because it can be extremely stressful, like extremely stressful.
yeah.
And I think it really has to do with perspective because you may start drinking more. Some people smoke weed, some people do cocaine, crack, or they step out on their family. Like, there's all these different things that can happen. Maybe you watch more TV, maybe you eat more junk food. People find outlets, so to speak, right? So I'm not saying I've done any of those. I'm not saying I haven't done them. I plead the
You've
fifth,
read about people
right?
who do stuff, right?
Yeah, I read about it. So I think during that time, one of the best things you can have in hindsight, you got to have a coach, a seer, a spiritual guide, somebody who you can talk to. Like, to just do it on an island by yourself is not a good idea. Like,
Mm,
it is not a good idea. You have to have someone that you can, besides, your attorneys and things like that, you have to have somebody who you can bounce ideas off of, and preferably someone who is not involved in that situation. It needs to be somebody who's neutral, in my opinion, right? Because if you're talking to your attorney, he's going to be going a certain way because, hey, you guys are in this, or guys or gals are in this for business, right? So people who think business don't think the same way otherwise, right? So having outside counsel, somebody to talk to, somebody who's invested in you and who you invest in as well, to make sure that you're not just exploiting them, I think is the absolute best thing that you can have.
mm,
Because I definitely, everybody goes through stress, and I come from a family out of Detroit, Michigan, where my grandfather was the preacher of a church that I physically grew up in, like lived in the church. And my grandmother was the first lady of the church. And the way they handled things were, they would go to church and they would pray, and there's nothing wrong with prayers. I think my grandmother's prayers kept a lot of us like alive, period, just growing up, right? Just her prayers and the energy she put behind it. And I think that's absolutely needed for sure. And that's what you can do for somebody else. But I also think that you, as the individual, need to have some kind of foundation that grounds you, whether
mm,
it be meditation, whether it be, including journaling, going out and helping other people, like something to center you so that you're not just constantly in hurricane category 5 mode all the freaking time.
mm,
Because that is a burnout. And I mentioned my family because, I never thought about this. I'm glad you asked me that. I have certain family members. My grandparents had 8 children, and they adopted two. And there's one child living out of the 8 of the biological children. And I would say one, two of them are out of 8 children. Two were not addicted to drugs or alcohol. We're talking about the preacher. My grandpa was a preacher. Only two were not addicted to drugs, and one of them was addicted to work. He was just a freaking workaholic to the point where he literally he was working so hard. He was a smart guy, engineer, professor, everything, and he was shoveling snow and like literally had a heart attack and froze in his driveway. Like he dropped, he fell on the ground and froze, like froze to death, while his son was looking out the window, right? And because he was such a workaholic that maybe he didn't have enough time to nurture those relationships because your son's looking out the window while man, that's like that's a whole nother story, right? And then I had an auntie who ended up passing away as well, but everybody else was on like drugs or something that they were extremely addicted to. And I think in hindsight, I think one of the reasons that happened is because they didn't, it's okay to go to, a book and read scriptures and things like that. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But then what are you developing inside to help you fight or get through all these different things that are going to be happening in your life? So I think what happened with it could be my mom, even my dad to an extent, and my other uncles and aunties. I think the reason a lot of them were addicted to substances is because they didn't have like an internal foundation to build on,
Mm.
right? It, everything you do is external. You go to coffee for energy, right? And you go to marijuana to relax, and you go to alcohol to calm down or whatever, right? And you smoke cigarettes to, I guess, calm your nerves, whatever. You have all these different external things, but nothing's building up the internal.
Mm.
So you may even go to pray, which is cool, right? But then what are you doing to build up your internal foundation? So I'm not saying that I've done that the right way. And since I grew up in the church, I didn't grow up, knowing what meditation meant. I just thought it was something to see, the karate guys do on TV in the East or something like that. I didn't know what it was, but I did come to realize, and I'm glad I realized how important it was, but I'm glad I had a chance to be exposed to it before I got into business. Not that I utilize it as much as I should, but I don't think I know having some kind of system that helps you ground yourself, that helps you take war out of heaven, right? And I remember reading, you heard of the word amen, right? Like when people, like they pray, they say amen afterwards. Well, I always thought it meant so be it because I grew up in the church. But then I went a step further in culture and I realized that there used to be a deity called um, Amen or Asar, and it really, or at this tree of life called Amen. And you know what that word meant in that culture, which is way before Christianity? It means to zero out. It means nothingness,
Hmm.
like literally nothing. So when you get to like, let's say if you stressed out, like if we just sat down for 5 minutes, you have all these thoughts racing through our heads, right? Like, man, I got the bills, and my boyfriend or husband is acting up, my wife is doing this, my children doing this, I got companies and all this crazy stuff, right? It's just like war in your brain or in your mind, right? And then when you can get to a place of amen, which means nothingness, you can zero all of that out, and you
Mm.
just have peace,
Yeah.
right? Even though it may be just for 20 minutes a day or 30 minutes a day, I really think, and now that I'm talking to you, I have to implement that more. But I think having a spiritual guide, having a counselor, having some kind of coach to help you through these things, and then also your own foundational practices that you do to help keep war out of heaven are
Mm.
essential.
No, that's really good. I think also when we speak of addictions, I think we very often look at it from the wrong angle. Gabor Mate, I think, do you know him, the trauma expert? I think you might know him when you see his face, you probably know him. I think he was a Holocaust survivor, so he's very knowledgeable on trauma, and he has a documentary called "The Wisdom of Trauma," I believe,
It's
and he's
called the what?
the wisdom of trauma.
Okay,
So
check that out.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing he said was instead of asking why the addiction, you should ask why the pain, because the addiction is a symptom of the pain, not a root problem in itself, right? And
Right.
Johan Hari, he has the most amazing TED talk on addiction as well. And he says the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it is connection. So he explains this. He talks about this research that they took place. They took a bunch of rats and put them in a cage, and then they gave them two water bottles, one with heroin and one without heroin. And they were like, which one are you gonna take? And almost all the rats went for the one with heroin, and they died. And then
Mm.
they're like, but we just gave them a cage with nothing in it. Let's try a different experiment where we give them a cage, but then there's also toys and there's one of those running wheels and there's colors and there's friends and there's stuff for them to do and to engage in. And then they put them in there and none of the rats took the heroin water because they had something that they were stimulated by. They had something that they could connect to. And I mean, obviously,
Mm.
human beings are not rats. I fully acknowledge that there's a difference. But I think if we treat the addiction in itself as the root cause, we just end up continuously treating symptoms instead of actually getting to the bottom of what the problem is, right? And very often what I
Mm.
see, and I see especially in men, is that they very rarely have a safe space to express themselves in a vulnerable way. It's a
Mm.
lot of men, they just don't have a space where they can communicate because they're always supposed to be the strong one. And then on the other hand, you're going to have women who try to express themselves and then they're being blamed for complaining or being hysterical or there's just a lot of negativity also involved with a woman that's trying to bring up these deeper layers of pain. And we're not really taught to hold space for difficulty, right? We're always taught that, oh, just, get over it, fix it. Big boys don't cry. You be stronger than that. Hold it in.
Mhm.
Don't put this on other people. And then in that sense, we're kind of taught that all of these so-called negative emotions and experiences, they're bad and we should not bring that onto others. And then we bottle it up. And I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of people turn to addiction is because they simply don't have better ways of handling pressure. They don't have better ways of handling their pain.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of the reasons that, so for example, religious communities, they can be really helpful. I think some of them are harmful, right? We do see churches sometimes where there's just a lot of judgment and there's not room for anyone to share and be vulnerable and there's not
Right.
space for that either. But there are really amazing spaces where people they can come and they can be held and they have people that hug you and listen to you and let you cry and they pray over you. So, but I
Mhm.
think that it's just so important that we as human beings, we share these experiences more. And I think I love that you're coming here and you're talking about these things because as we spoke about previously, this is not a conversation that a lot of people have, right? We don't really speak publicly about a lot of the issues that people will face as entrepreneurs. And sometimes it's even glorified. We will see a lot of people, you should get into entrepreneurship. It is the ticket to the better life. And it's like, yeah, but do you know that there's also a lot of pressure that comes with that? And what do we do now with all of these
Mhm.
people who don't know what to do because they're like, now I'm here on this journey and I can't just go back because I have my team, right? I have payroll, I have family, I have rent, and so what do we do now? And I fully understand. It would be actually interesting to look at the research in terms of is it a disproportionately high number of entrepreneurs that deal with abuse, addiction, for example, right? And I think also when you look at leadership, higher positions, people that just deal with a lot of pressure, with a lot of high stake decision making, it's really hard
Mhm.
to deal with. And when I work with leadership teams here in Rwanda, one of the biggest issues that the CEOs say that they have is that there's even their C-suite, they can't hold decisions. They will advise on this is what happens if we make this decision, but they're not going to take the decision. They're going to leave it up to the CEO to make the decision. which,
Mhm.
and I think it really comes from we just don't learn to sit with that pressure, right? We don't learn to sit with the risk. We don't, because it feels like a threat. It feels like a risk. It feels like something that's very uncomfortable. So So what do we do when we sit with all of this, right? When you have to hold that and continue life. And I love seeing that you still, because, obviously I follow you on Instagram, and I see that, you're still going on vacations, you're still taking your wife for dates, you're still hanging out with your kid, you're still build, and I think that's just so important, right? When we're talking about having connection.
Hmm.
But I love seeing that you're still able to do that, right? You still go travel, you take that time to be with your family, and bring some sort of joy into your life, so you end up being just only all of the mystery.
I have to, I didn't think about it. Like, I guess I kind of thought about it before, but not in the way you said it. And I have to agree because that connection, whether it be church members or whatever kind of group you have, your family, for me, it's my family.
Mm.
Without that, it would have been pretty rough, and you're right. Men, we do keep things bottled up inside, where I think some men we'd probably just cry if we could, but it's not going to help anything. It may make you feel better for a moment. Yet having like that bigger why, like a group, I can see why now. I just thought about this. I can see why, and it's probably sure other people have thought about this before me, but I can see why now people like you have the Muslim community, the Christian community, the Jewish community. You have not everybody's right, but at least they have their own community members to go to and to commune with each other and to kind of lift each other up during during tough times. So for me, it's definitely my family. I've had, I have friends, but you don't like really want to just like unload on your friends, and they're probably going through all their own stuff. You have your staff members; they just want to get paid, right? They feel for you a little bit, but hey, make sure the payroll comes through. And then you have some staff members who are like just looking and say, "Hey, it's not looking too good. I'm going to take whatever I can, you know,
Yeah.
and make it for myself at this level." Yet, you're so right about that. Having the connection with other people, I don't think that is also what has absolutely gotten me through it. And you're right, because you get to a point where it's like, F it, you know what I mean? It's just going to be an all out fight. And when I think that's a dangerous person, to be honest with you as well. When
Yeah.
you push anything in the corner, anything, it could be. I remember I had an ex girlfriend, and she used to love these freaking Pomeranian dogs. And she's damn, all these damn dogs, right? Felt like lived in a kennel or something like that. And I remember one day getting the dog in the corner. It's like a little bitty dog, but man, it was vicious as hell. I was like, whoa, I had never seen that side of a dog. And
Mm.
I think humans are the same way. And you hear about men, for the most part, going out and shooting up places and doing all kinds of like, whoa, like, why did they get to this level? Children going into schools, just, shooting people for no reason or whatever. And now that you say that, I wondered, were they at a point, mentally speaking, where they felt like they had nothing else to lose? And
Mm.
I think sometimes opposition, they don't understand that. When you put a person in a position, especially a male in particular, who may not know how to express themselves, at you have. Let me take a step back. So we have five senses, right? Sight. What is it? Sight, touch, smell, hearing, taste. Animals have the same thing. So what separates us for the most part? I think many of us don't rise above the level of the animal level. So what do animals do when you get them in the corner? They come out fighting, whatever. They don't have these mechanisms to go and sit down and meditate or whatever, or to go and talk to somebody and like unload their problems and then try to get feedback from it. And which is why I think you have men now who do these type of things where they just snap. Like they literally just snap, and they're isolated in most cases. In most, not all, but as far because I don't know what they do before they do their heinous acts. But from the research that we've seen, or from what they show in the media, at least, it's just like they're isolated people. Like they, for some reason, they didn't have loving family, or they weren't really involved in community or something like that. And so having that connection, now that you say that, I think is key. I think that also is what kind of helped me get through this. And I've had periods where I've had team members who were connected for a minute, but then the true colors came out, and they were connected for the money for the most part. But my family absolutely has been my rock, and I've also had a legal team, believe it or not, who has been like family to me. I cannot stress that enough. I've had some really horrible, bad freaking legal advice in my time. Horrible, like not even just to my experience, but it's an audience had to look at what they did. They were like, "Oh my freaking god!" And I've had some serious opposition. At the end of the day, it's all about money with those kind of people. But I've had some very non-transactional people in my life that meaning than even what I saw at the moment. So I'm glad you said that.
Mm. Yeah, and I think also actually when it does when we're talking about connection, there's something around the quality of the connection as well. Because as you said, some people they look like they're connecting, but there's an ulterior motive. And I think a lot of what we see today in society today, there is a lot of weaponizing judgment and guilt and shame, and then making people feel like they're not good enough or they should be better. And I feel like that is something that really disconnects us, right? I feel like also the use of social media will very much disconnect us because we see a mask, right? We see the 1%, we see the filtered version, we see this people in a way that's not really fully truly their life. And then we use that as a mirror to our own life, and then we feel a disconnection from what we see in the lives of others, and we feel like there's something wrong with our lives. Why is my life not like this? Why do I not look like that? And you're literally looking at an AI version of someone, right? And
Hmm.
there's just something around the quality of connection, which is just a pure connection of a way of saying, I see you as you are, and I see and I love and I support you as you are. And with all of these so-called flaws and imperfections, I still see and love you as you are. Instead of, oh, all of these things are wrong with you, right? Sometimes you have parents or you have partners who will just bring up all the things that are wrong. And even though you're connected to the person, and even though you're talking to the person, and maybe even this person is mentoring you, the connection in itself is broken, I would say. And I think there's
Mm.
so important that we create more spaces where people can just be and share, and where we don't
Mm.
bring out the judgment of saying, "Oh, you should have done this." Right? Have you had those friends where I'm going through this. Oh, but why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? You should have done this instead of saying, "Wow, that I'm really sorry you're going through that." Right? You see how those two are very different in terms of how we connect with someone. And I think so Johan Hari, the guy who did the TED with the rats, he wrote a book called Lost Connections, which is one of the best books that I've read. He talks about
Mm.
not just connection with other people, but also connection to nature. Things like gardening can help with depression. He
Mm.
talks about connection to your work, not just that you show up for work, but that you have a sense of fulfillment, that you have a sense of impact, that you feel connected to what it is that you're doing. And I think it's somewhere between 10 or 13, I don't fully remember, but he mentions these different types of connections that we can have that can really help you with your mental and emotional health.
You know what? Let me. Oh man, that I didn't even think about all this stuff that you're saying because at one time I used to go to a lot of masterminds. Not go to. I used to pay. Right. There's no just going. Right.
That's
And
expensive stuff. That's
say what?
expensive stuff. Masterminds are expensive. That's a down payment and a half.
Some of them you make connections, but many of them you don't. And the moment that payment stops, it's over.
Mhm.
And so I think that was one thing I was doing, and I should have been building up different connections, or in addition to that, building up different connections. And so sometimes, I always hear people say, I used to always hear people say, entrepreneurship is lonely, or it's lonely at the top, or whatever they say, right? And I think it's because as entrepreneurs, we're so focused on, we have to be focused on growing the business, otherwise it'll just fail. But we don't focus on building other connections. And I think that's why some masterminds they go do other things outside of the mastermind, I guess, to help build more connections, hopefully. It's just sometimes it's just that once you in every business has to operate based upon funding. Even churches, you know, need money. Otherwise, you stop that and the church is over with as well. So I'm not saying they should be doing it for free, but once you stop paying, the connection is over, right? And sometimes a group connection can be a lot different than an individual connection. Or maybe in some of these groups, they should have more opportunity to make personal connections. Or while you're doing that for business, then also outside of that, what kind of personal connections do you have? And I will say, over the last maybe 3 to 4 years or so, I've had some personal connections, like with you, outside of just business, even though I met you through the whole mastermind thing. But the personal connection to me far outweighs the the financial connection, through a mastermind or something like that. Because the moment that payment stops, that connection that you thought was there is over. It's done, right? It's cooked. But you have other, and sometimes you'll make connections in there that outlast that particular mastermind group or whatever, which I've had the opportunity to make that as well. There's nothing wrong with going into masterminds and when it's over, or making connections in the mastermind. That my Now what I try to do, and now that you're saying I'm going to make a concerted effort to do it, is what kind of connection can I make in that mastermind or outside of that mastermind, outside of just money? Because sometimes I think, even me, I may be going to these groups looking for a financial connection. So I'm already coming in transactional, but yet I'm looking for something better, but I'm coming in transactional. So what do I expect, I guess, right? So I think I'm going to make a concerted effort to make more personal connections, because even in business, now that I think about it, with the clients that we have, the ones that I've had the longest, who personally know me, it's yes, it is a business connection, but it's a personal connection as well that I think keeps them on board with me. So the more connections you have, I think the better you would be in business, and absolutely the better you would be in life. Because I do have friends. They don't necessarily know all the stuff that I go through, but they're my friends. And they're not my friends because I pay them,
Mm-hmm.
right? What I see a lot on social media is that people make friends because another person may be popular, or they see that person being able to get them something. And those kind of connections you need in business, but I don't necessarily value those outside of the transactional phase. I want to build more connections that don't necessarily aren't 100% reliant on some kind of financial transaction. And I think those are healthy, and I think they last a lot longer.
Yeah, and I think it's important. I mean, like you said, they say that it's lonely on the top. And I feel like one of the reasons that it's lonely on the top is because we put people on the top on a pedestal and we don't really allow them to be human. There, and we internalize that. So when we're being put on a pedestal, there is this subconscious need to uphold the image of, oh, I'm up here on this pedestal. And in order for me to be on a pedestal means that other people can't be up there with you. And now all of a sudden you have to be perfect. You can't have flaws, you can't have imperfections, you can't be vulnerable. And now you don't have anyone to share it with when you're going through stuff, because then they will see your human side. And I think that's one of the reasons that it becomes really lonely on the top, because we don't allow the leaders, we don't allow the entrepreneurs the human side of just being like, oh shoot, this is really rough. I don't know how to handle this. It's like, oh, but I thought you were the guy who handles everything. And then all of a sudden we feel like our image is flawed because we were supposed to be the person that can handle everything, right? And I mentioned this actually, I brought up this story in my most recent TEDx, the one that was just released. I was talking about, being just a very young teenager, and I had broken down over something. I was crying over something that my mom had said. And then my dad came in and he said it with love, right? He said it from a place of, I really want to be here for you. And he said, you just seem so strong. I had no idea, that you were going through stuff. But what I
Mhm.
heard was, oh, you weren't supposed to break down, right? That was because I realized he had the image of me being a really strong person, and me crying meant that all of a sudden he saw this vulnerable person and not someone who was strong. And I was like, oh, I have to uphold this image. And then it just created years and years and years of me just wearing this mask of I'm the strong person, I can handle everything. But that's incredibly lonely because now you can never let anyone see you cry, right? You can never allow anyone to see the vulnerable side of you. And then when you do try to open up for someone, they're like, you don't look like, it doesn't look like you look fine, right? But I'm telling you, I'm not fine. Can you not understand that?
Right, right.
And they just have this idea of who you are as a strong person. And I think until we really start leading with vulnerability, until we start showing the world that it's very possible to be strong and in leadership and handle things and also be human and also have a really bad day and also being in a place where, wow, today is just really rough. Today, just please don't expect 100% from me today because I'm really going through things. Until we reach that stage, I think the top will be very lonely because we don't have anyone to show our humanity to.
I think women handle that a lot better. I'm going to step out and say I think, I'm not like anti-chauvinistic or chauvinistic. I guess I am anti-chauvinistic, but I'm not like some guy who's against men or anything like that, right? I think women are better leaders because they know how to juggle all these things at one time. So for me, as the quote unquote head of the household, right? That's what they call us, right? I'm careful how much, let's call it negativity, I bring to my wife.
Mm.
Because I don't think women are built to handle stress the same way as men are. If they did, I think they'd have the same issues we have, alopecia and all kinds of other issues, right, that come with stress. And I've stepped back on, and that's why I think it's also good to have another safe space where you can go and communicate with someone. And when you tell them, it's not like you're telling your significant other, and now she's like, damn, how are we going to pay the bills? Or how are we going to take care of our children? You know what I mean? And
Mm.
she may not even be able to give you an objective point of view because she's like, let's get these bills taken care of. Whereas if you have another source to talk to, someone like a coach or somebody, where you can have these discussions, I think that's key because men, we can cry, we can do all those things, but in like still, hey, whatever's happening is still getting ready to happen, right? Like if a woman cries, then things stop. They're like, oh my God, what did you do to hurt her? The guy cries, they're like, man, what the frick is wrong with him, right? He's having this emotional breakdown in the store. A woman cries, people come to her aid or something like that. So I think it's one how we're nurtured and how we're trained. Also, I just I don't think men juggle that too well, right? We're kind of like one track. We're doing this and we're doing this. Like when I talk to men, I know there's something that they want and why they're insisting. I had a guy who I brought in the company, and they didn't really necessarily know that particular position. Really smart, super helpful. I mean, just like a good asset. But I wasn't able to compensate them at the level that they should have been because I wasn't being compensated. I didn't it just didn't have it, right? And there were other people who were being compensated more than both of us. Well, I didn't really understand that that person was there because they were looking for something way greater. It didn't necessarily come out directly and say it, but they wanted something much, much, much greater. And so they were helping, but for an absolute payoff, which is understandable. It's not like the people who were there didn't want to pay off either. But when, in most cases, when you talk to men, like we're trained to say, okay, I'm helping you. What are you doing for me right now? Right? There's some women, unfortunately, who have adopted that same kind of mindset. where they're taking on the personalities of men today, and they sort of have that too. Okay, what have you done for me lately? What can you do for me right now? Like this transactional kind of thing. All right, we can be together if you do this. If you buy this, you buy that. Next thing you know, she's selling herself. You know what I mean? Because it's so freaking transactional. So I think if we can surround ourselves with people, whether it be men or women, who can be less transactional. And I like to take, I like how women juggle all these different things at the same time: the emotion, the stress in business. You know, they look out for the significant other. They have to try to look out for themselves. They look out for the household, even the dog. I heard, who was it? I heard Steve Harvey say that if the woman's not happy, then the dog is not even happy. I'm like, damn. Like nobody in the nobody in the house is happy
Hmm.
because and why? Like the man could be in the corner drinking beer, you know, hasn't haven't shaved in 2 months, and they're like, man, he's just bad. But when the woman is unhappy in the house, that's it. Nothing functions properly. So there's something. I think it's the way we're nurtured. You know, girls are given a doll, or they learn. They're learning emotions and people at a very 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 early age. Very early age. They play with the dollhouse and things like that. Whereas guys, the basketball or the truck, like these inanimate kind of objects. Or if we do have like a superhero for the most part, it's like somebody who goes and beats people up or something like that, right? Whereas women are like they're learning all these different ways to deal with people at a much higher level or an emotional level, which I think is the missing element for a lot of CEOs. And I've had to kind of like learn that myself, how you say things. And you said it yourself, like today may not be a good day. You may be going through something. Whereas, most men say, hey, listen, I don't care. Make it happen. I don't care how you feel. I don't care if your leg is hurt, you're bleeding. It doesn't matter. Where a woman may say, okay, you know what? I can kind of sense that, you know, there's something happening here. And we'll have some kind of sympathy or compassion for that person and get them through that period, which I think equips them to be, in many cases, a better leader or a more equipped leader than some men who would just say, you know what, it's war if this doesn't happen. Where women sometimes will figure out a way to deal with it could be the symptoms or to deal with the emotional aspects of why certain things are happening. So anyway, I'm just kind of talking out loud based upon what you were saying because as I think about it, it's so true. It's so true.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's still so many issues to unpack. I mean, I think we could probably talk about this all day, but what I see when I work with women who are these so-called high achievers, the ones that, yeah, now the dogs are coming to say hi. I see that there's a lot of women who are very happy to offer emotional support to other people, to extend themselves for other people, but they don't allow that to extend to themselves. So they're still dealing
Hmm.
with a lot of stress, they're still dealing with a lot of pressure. They still don't have an outlet for that because they still want to, they're still the pedestal people who can't show vulnerability. And I think very quickly we're very quick to judge women as soon as they become vulnerable by almost assuming that, oh, now they can't handle the pressure, oh, now they can't do this, now they can't do that. And so they try to also hold up this mask of perfection, of there's nothing that can hurt me or harm me, but there's still not really space for them to be vulnerable themselves, so they can understand other people's needs and there's something about when we don't allow ourselves, and I feel like this is for both men and women. I think it's so important that we have spaces where we can express, where we can feel, because bottled up emotion, and we see this more and more, there's more and more evidence that supports that bottled up emotions, whether it's anger or grief or sadness or frustration, it can cause physical disease, right? We see more and more
Hmm.
correlation between bottled up emotion, bottled up anger, and then autoimmune diseases, multiple sclerosis. I mean, we see with stress, it's widely recognized, right? Stress can cause heart issues. We know that, but
Yeah.
we're seeing more and more that unhandled emotion can cause heart issues, can cause autoimmune disease, like I said, there's an irritable bowel syndromes, right? It can come from it can be a physical expression of the emotions that we don't allow ourselves to handle. And if you ask someone like Joe Dispenza, and I know that he's kind of controversial, there's a lot of researchers that say
Who?
Joe Dispenza.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a neurologist, I believe. At least he's into neuroscience, and he does a lot of brain scans, and he also is very woo woo, right? He's spiritual, looks a lot into how does the brain respond to meditations, and how does it respond when we're a group of people together meditating, and how does that change? But he wrote this book called Supernatural, and it's kind of out there, but he does talk a lot about.
But
Yeah, yeah, it's a really cool book actually, but he does use single stories mostly to bring through his point, which is great for writing, less great for convincing researchers and scientists. But he
mm,
talks a lot about how he has people coming to him that have just chronic pain, chronic illness. Doctors don't know how to handle it, and then they go
mm,
in and they start working on them actually allowing themselves to feel some of the griefs that they've experienced, that they've refused to look at, and then eventually they release this illness that they've been carrying around. So we hear more and more of these type of stories, and there's definitely more research to be done on it, right? But
yo, I'm gonna look that up. Maybe I should ask ChatGPT. I don't even know if ChatGPT would know. But who's done the research on the health, like CEOs or people in leadership positions? Like, what is the maybe someone did research on 100 CEOs or 1,000, whatever, to see the health that they've been able to maintain throughout their careers. I remember reading a book. Man, that's so crazy. I won't even say the name of the book, but that is really interesting because if bottled up, that's bad. And I've been there myself. I'm not even gonna lie because that's when you go to alcohol or this or whatever kind of thing to help you escape from it, right? I think that happens. But then when you do that, it's like compounding problems on top of problems because you already have the problem that's bottled up. You're not talking about it. Then you add another problem, which is this escape. And it's so crazy because if I think about my family, when they have gone to substance abuse, it wasn't just them that they destroyed. They didn't just destroy themselves.
yeah.
They destroyed the whole family around them. And those family members who are, let's say you have a dad who is now an alcoholic because he's going through whatever he's going through. He doesn't just destroy himself. He's abusive sometimes to the wife, he's abusive to the children, right? And then what do they in turn become? The child becomes like, this other child who goes and maybe bullies other people or acts out in certain ways or goes and harms somebody else or does something else, right? And the wife maybe hurt or something like that. Maybe she's like, she never trusted another man or something like that. It's so many crazy things that happen as a result. And I didn't think about it until when you're bottled up like that. And
Mhm.
if you're a CEO or this leader, yeah, that's definitely not. I mean, I guess you can pay to be in a group or something like that, but I don't even know. I don't know how vulnerable these people are. Because I paid 100K to be in a group. It definitely wasn't a place where you can be vulnerable. It was just like about business or something like that,
Mhm.
and purely transactional, like purely. Who do I talk to in that group today? Maybe one person. He was the leader of the group, and we talked based upon business for the most part. So yeah, I don't know. Are there spaces like that where you have, yeah, where would a CEO or quote unquote leader go to, besides his significant other, which, he doesn't want to like unload all his problems on his significant other and have her stressed out with him, right? Like, you said, your significant other went through all those legal issues and you were like, you were his support and you needed support to be his support, right?
Yes.
So, right, because so you don't want to do that. I've done that before and I'm like, damn, I'm stressing her out. So, what do people do? Where do they go?
Yeah, I mean, coaching, therapy, there's so many different spaces now that you can go in, and there's male groups. There are boot camps, there are retreats. There's so many different places.
The male groups do crazy stuff. They jump off of cliffs and all that kind of stuff. Like,
Yeah. If that works, honestly, if that works, I still feel like it doesn't really address the root issue. I feel like you got to feel it in order to heal it, right? That's a kind of a common expression.
yeah,
I believe that's true based on just personal experience, both for myself and the people that I know. But I think also I would feel worse if my partner did not bring these things for me to
really?
yeah, because I can still sense that something is off even when he puts a smile on his face. And he's
Mm.
tried to do that, and I can't stand it. I can't stand when there's a smile on his face and I know that something is up, because
So you
that
want to
makes,
know everything.
but then I get into my head and like, what could be wrong? And then I start going all through all the worst case scenarios about, is he like in serious debt? Is he going through this? Is someone dying? Do someone have what if someone has cancer? My head just starts thinking about all the things, and no matter what he's going through, my head can make a worse scenario, right? No
Mm.
matter what he's going through, my
Mm.
head can make up a million things that are way worse than what is actually going on. So sometimes I've just had to like hold him down and be like, you better tell me what's going on right now. And then he tells me, and I'm like, oh, it's just that. I mean, we can handle
That's
that. I thought you were dying, or so I always prefer that he's honest with me. But I also know that he has friends that he can be open and vulnerable with, and I have friends that I can be open and vulnerable with. And we there's so many different types of services that are available, and we both do personal development work, which means that we do the work of figuring out how do we sit with this stress without it becoming a negative influence on our lives. How can we sit with this really and not let it impact too
mm.
much? And a lot of my work has been in get out of the worst case scenario, because I used to be the kind of person that whenever I was in a difficult situation, I would always constantly be imagining the worst possible outcome. And I think a lot of us do that
Mm.
because then we think, if I can imagine the worst possible outcome, and how would I deal with the worst personal outcome, the worst possible outcome, then I know that I will be okay because it's in my head, and in my head I can figure it out, but it's still really, really, really scary. So I would just constantly
Right.
be putting these worst case scenarios in my head, and then one day, and it would stress me out emotionally. And then one day I just asked myself, Rebecca, how many times has the worst case scenario actually happened? And it's one time in my whole life. And that was when
Mm-hmm.
I was on the way home. I was in the train. I was in Copenhagen. I was on the train, and my brother called me at like 9:30 p.m. He wouldn't usually never call me at that hour. We would always be talking during the daytime. And then I thought, oh shoot, my mom's dead. And then I picked up the phone, and he told me our mom had a heart
Oh,
attack.
wow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, or her heart stopped beating, and I was like, what? I just could not process that. So
Right.
it's the only time in my life that this thing that I thought was the worst thing that could happen, it actually happened every single time. And this would be like on a weekly basis, or even sometimes on a daily basis. There was a period of time in my life, every time I would walk down a flight of stairs, I would see myself at the bottom of the stairs with a broken neck, or with like my tooth, my teeth broke. It would be really, really, really bad because I was so deep in the worst case scenario that every single thing I did, I'd be like, what if I get on the train and it explodes? What if I get on a flight and it flies into a building? What if we do like a new 9/11 and it's my that what?
You watch you watch a lot of movies?
Yeah, but it was really just my head, right? It was really in my head that was just constantly anticipating what would be the worst case. And I had to question myself and be like, when does the worst case
But
scenario
but
happen?
let me ask let me ask you a question. I remember reading a book a long time ago called I think The Biology of Belief.
Okay.
And it's Dr. Bruce something, Lipstein or something like that, right? It's like I probably read this book like 25 years ago. And I believe in that book they were talking about like the real image of what we believe is like, I guess, behind the lens of our eyes. It's like a movie that's projected on the screen.
Mm.
The picture coming from the projector and projected onto a screen. And he spoke about how some people would like be so like fervent about their religious beliefs that they would almost like sometimes, I don't know how true it was, but he says they would think about like the crucifixion and even develop like little like piercings in their hand, like they were crucified because what's coming out of their head is projecting this image. And the reason I'm asking you that is because you said you could see yourself at the bottom of the stairs with your neck broken and things like that. You had to see that image somewhere in order to project it. And I like lately to myself, I just literally started. I used to read these like I don't even think I have them anymore. I don't. I don't even have them up here anymore. These little books that I used to read back in the day, and it was called like it was like I don't know some not Masons, but some like deep thinkers used to write the book on how to reprogram your mind and stuff like that. And so I just recently started to sort of reprogram my own mind because when you have like all these, you have super shady, unethical bankers, and you know, all everybody in that camp is going to lie for themselves to protect their own financial interests. The Republicans are going to say whatever benefits them. The Democrats are going to say whatever benefits them, right? You have, you know, the people who are like direct enemies or trying to do something to you. So you have all this stuff going on. It's easy to just project out more of the same.
Mm.
Like so easy to project out more of the same. And then when you do get to your family, you know, you try to pull back from that, but you're still just imagine you probably most of us work, let's just say 10 hours a day, 8 hours a day, right? And so you have all this stuff that's happening, the stress of work, you got the boss, the co-worker, then you got all the stuff happening in politics, like are we even is America even going to be here in 2 years? You know what I mean? Then you have one group that's like they're superior to everybody. Then you have another group that say, "Hey, we just want to live, right?" Right? You
Mm.
have all this stuff going on. Then you have the media. Then you have all the stuff going on in your personal life, like just all this stuff. And then you get home to your family, where I'm guilty. I'm like, you know, texting and whatever. I'm not really there.
Right.
And they get this small moment where you see peace in your significant other or your children, like this small little tiny moment, and then you go to bed and you wake up and so every day you're constantly programming yourself with all this freaking negativity that's happening,
Mm.
and it's real. It's not like it's fake. Like things are happening. So what I've done just recently is um, there's this group that I'm in, and it's transactional, but they're offering something where there's a lady on there speaking. I don't even remember what her name is, and she's talking about not just woo woo think positive, but she is talking about things that reprogram yourself. I got a friend, Neil. You know Neil, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Neil was always like super positive like that, and sometimes I'd be like, man, he's so woo woo, but you have to right? I mean, that's my guy. I've been knowing Neo for years, and he's always very positive, and I
Mm.
can see why he tries to maintain that because there is so much else happening. Like he
Mm.
grew up in Philadelphia. Philadelphia is nothing to play with, right? It's like Detroit, maybe even worse in some certain aspects that I've been to. So how do you erase years and years and years of all these negative things that you've grown up seeing, things that have actually happened? His father went to jail. His father died in jail. I remember when he called me and told me that I was like, damn, right? All these things that are happening. How do you maintain peace in the midst of a storm? And I
Mm.
think you have to consistently reprogram yourself so that whatever is in here can project out there.
Right. Yeah, and it's a very interesting conversation because I spend a lot, I mean, obviously I went through the whole journey of really questioning my thoughts, right? Why do I keep, I don't actually experience the worst case scenario, so why do I keep imagining it? And why do I keep adjusting myself to it? And why do I keep allowing myself to be impacted by it emotionally? But then I spent many years doing the mindset work, change my thoughts, change my thoughts, change my thoughts. And I tried to get into this whole affirmation thing. So I would be saying all the, life is beautiful, life is this, and life is that. But my body in response would just be like, why are you lying? Right? You're a liar. So I would still feel, there would be a real disconnect between my thoughts and my feelings. And
Mm.
the, when I experienced a significant shift, like a life-changing shift, was when I started working on the emotion more than just my thoughts. So that would be, for example, just like you said, experiencing that moment of peace in your partner's face or in their, in their
Mm.
experience.
Mm.
So I would
Mhm.
start doing things like, just noticing, oh, there's a butterfly, right? There's the wagging tails on my dogs and their smiles when they come to me. It would be just going on a walk and seeing the flowers, smelling the flower. I literally, I will just go smell the flowers, and just experience that moment of what that blessing is. It is looking at the sunrise, looking at the sunset, whatever it is that you have access to. Just feeling when you're connecting with someone that you love. What does it feel like? And I would ask myself that a lot. What does this feel like? Where do I feel this in my body? So more than even what are my thoughts, it would be how am I responding to this? And in the beginning, I could barely feel anything because I was so disconnected from my emotion because all of my attention had been on what is going on in my head. So I didn't even feel my body because I was like, no, no, my body is telling me that I'm lying. So I'm going to shut my body off and keep staying in my head and ignore all of the messages that are coming through. And then at some point, I was like, let me actually try to feel what's going on.
Oh, that, that's so key. You
Yeah.
know, now you got me thinking because you know, my wife is like, oh my gosh, she's so thoughtful. Just like never have I come home and heard screaming and hollering. She may have disagreed with me in certain things, but she has a very tactful way of doing it, extremely tactful way. Now, I've been in situations prior where I come home to like blood in the eye, like, whoa, what in the world? And you just walk in and walk right back out, right? Like, man, I just sleep on the streets if I need to. Like, whoa, this is like crazy.
Mm.
But from the woman's perspective, not because I know all men always think about how we think about how everything affects us, and I'm pretty sure some women think the same way. But now that you say that, if any man has a daughter, most men want to be there for their daughters, right? They want to be that place of peace, no matter what she does. Honey, baby, you can always come back to me and I'll protect you.
Mm.
So when women leave their homes, they got to be like, especially if they've had a father, somebody has to replace that. Dad is in another country, another state, another home, handling his. And so, but while I'm talking to you, it has me thinking what place, like how I can't necessarily give my wife peace that has to be generated internally,
Mm.
but I support that energy. So, do I give her hugs? Do I give her kisses? Right? A flower here and there, even if it's freaking dandelion from the backyard. Like, what am I doing to help her feel secure? Or I remember one time, I don't know where she got it from. She read something and was like, "Hey, we need to kiss 6 or 7 times a day." I was like, "Okay." I was like, 6 or 7 times a day? She's like, "Yeah, we need to hug and kiss 6 or 7 times a day." Now I didn't fall through with it, but she told me a bunch of times that's what we need to do. And she must have heard it somewhere, read it somewhere. But now in hindsight that I think about it, what's wrong with having those check-ins like that on a daily basis to help? Because if I'm kissing and hugging her, even though I know that's what she wants, it has to help me too.
Mm.
And I don't think you can help somebody and not feel great about it. I'm not saying you have to give them money, but I don't think you can even remain depressed if you're the person who's constantly helping other people because it's so uplifting and it feels so like relieving and it just feels really, really, really freaking good. So I wonder from a quote unquote CEO or leadership position, despite all the stuff you have to go through clients who are super shady. I remember we had to spend $500,000 on some BS from a client who went out and found an attorney who was super freaking shady, and we had to spend all this money, even though the client already owed us money, but that was their way of getting out of the debt, I guess. It's, oh my God, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So despite all of that, what else can be done to help give back and help other people, right? To help, I guess helping other people is sort of helping yourself. So I'm just saying this out loud now that I talk to you. I have some friends who constantly giving and giving and giving and giving as much as they possibly can. And now that I'm talking to you, I'm like thinking to myself, okay, maybe I should adopt that more, despite what's happening, despite what's going on. Is not so, because if I'm constantly focused on war, that's the state of mind that I'm going to be in all the time, which is an easy way to burn out. So how am I balance? Like, what am I giving, whether it be to myself, in my home, with my children, my wife, and just to people I don't know that may not necessarily benefit me. So yeah, thank you for that. That's good. That's good.
Yeah, and I think it's really I think it's such a big part of the discussion that a lot of people have these days on purpose, right? What's my purpose? What's my assignment? What am I meant to do? What am I here for? And I feel like one of the reasons that we're so disconnected from it is because we're always focused on me, ourselves. But our purpose is going to be in the service that we provide for other people, right? Where can we provide the highest level of service? Where can we do something for others that is uniquely our gifts in the way that we can serve our communities and uplift other people? And I just see that in the way that we experience fulfillment when other people are uplifted. For me, there's just no way that it can be anything else than that, because I feel like our purpose, when we fulfill our purpose, we will feel good, right? There's no way that we've been given a purpose or that we have a purpose and it makes us feel bad, because there's just something very unique around doing something that we're meant to do. It's supposed to feel right. And I feel like the only thing that we can ever do that feels so right is in the feeling that we experience when we uplift other people in whatever way that is unique to us that we're able to do.
You know what? I just gotta. Okay, yeah, that's the really good freaking insight. Because so when you're in business, you don't necessarily think like what you're talking about, right? Because you think about whatever I do has to turn into a dollar. I've heard people say if I spend money, I got to get it back from somebody else. So
Right.
that and I heard some people say they walk around. I think I heard Grant Cardone say he walks around, who got my money, right? So he's looking at everybody like like a dollar bill, like who got my money? And I get what he's saying, right? But right, but then you have other. There's another way to look at it. So I've seen Grant Cardone do many like webinars where he's teaching and that he's selling something on the back end.
Mhm.
100% selling something in most cases, right? And then I've seen, let's say, Hermosi, right, where and it just came to me where he's constantly teaching and giving all these gems out. He's not even trying to sell you, even though you're going to want more from him because he's giving so much more. He may not be giving you information like, "Hey, you can cry on my shoulder" type of like vibe, but he's giving, and that maybe that's another way entrepreneurs can just give. He's giving so much that now everybody, as far as I know, he's kind of like the premier guy out there right now, the premier business guy out there. He's not as rich as Bezos, but Bezos doesn't give out any information to anybody, right? He may not even have. I'm pretty sure he could. He probably has more time than anybody else. But right now, the person who's constantly giving out there, who's not necessarily always trying to sell you something, is a promotion. And I guess that is another act of kindness that entrepreneurs can do. My buddy Neil, he's always having like giveaways, and he may get sponsors to help him, or maybe I've helped him sponsor different things, but I'm pretty sure he has to put his own money in there as well, where he may just, hey, let's get together, and whatever magic happens as a result of that. Where he has like a house in Atlanta, like this mansion, and he'll cater it and have food, and he'll put his own money in. He'll get other people to put the money in. He's not even selling you anything that day. He's, hey, I'm giving an opportunity for all these people to come together and see what kind of magic can happen. And I think entrepreneurship like that is a beautiful thing to have. Where if you look at, let's say, a financial institution like a bank, what do they give? Nothing. It's
Yeah.
just take, take. Everything is how can I exploit? How can I exploit? How can I exploit? How can I squeeze the juice? How can I take somebody's dollar and make it, $10 out of it or $100 out of it? it's never really a thing where they're kind of like giving back to the community, so to speak. So anyway, I'm thinking about that, thinking out loud, how I can transition my business and what I do. I grew up in the church. The church is all about giving, right? I sometimes I think they gave too much. I couldn't even get sneakers; they gave the money away, right? My grandparents gave the money away. But what can I do today is going to be not my 2026 philosophy, but my now philosophy. What ways can I give more? And if something comes back, something comes back. If it doesn't, then so be it. But that's
Mm.
what I'm going to.
Yeah, and I think something comes back in just in doing it, really, how we feel when someone is impacted by what we do. I think that kind of it just elevates our energy, right? It is bringing us that beautiful feeling that we can then carry into something else. I think that there's a benefit even in just giving in the way that we can do. And it's so fun because you're talking about these banks, and obviously now I live in Rwanda, right, which is very different from the US. And we actually have banks that create a lot of initiatives that are designed to help entrepreneurs. That includes grants. I just saw a new post being made that one of the banks they have set up um, a program focused on women entrepreneurs where they can get access to loans that they just because a lot of people here they don't really they want to start a business but they don't have collateral, they don't have, there's a big struggle in trying to set things up, and a lot of the banks are actually trying to accommodate that. One of the bigger
Mm,
banks here has created a foundation that is literally just giving away money, so it's a different feeling. I mean, obviously it's still a business, they still have to make money, they still have to say no to a lot of the applications, but I think we have a different feeling around the banks here. That is not really,
mm,
we don't really see them as kind of as exploitative. We do see them more as a service, which is just a very different experience from what you're describing. But you're right. I think one thing that has come to me a lot lately is just this call to create a community where anyone can just join, where there's not necessarily a payment wall. Simply
mm,
because I feel like there's an obligation for me. I personally feel an obligation to share more freely. I had a friend not so long ago who just several times during our conversation, she said, "You speak light into people. You speak light into people." She felt so uplifted and like her life was,
mm.
she could change her life. She had that feeling. She saw the clear path of it. And she was like, "You speak light into me. You speak light into people." And that sentence, it just has stuck with me so much. Like, if that's what I'm able to do, I should be doing that for way more people. More people
So
just so
what?
be lit up.
How are you going to do it without financing? You going to like just have a newsletter or a podcast or a live? Like, how are you going to do that?
Yeah, I'm considering doing it in a Facebook group community where I go live in the group and allow people to ask questions and just allow people to suggest, these are the areas that I'm struggling with, and then just do some videos on that, and then maybe take those videos and also add them to YouTube or something. But the thing is that I haven't really been so big on content. I haven't really, it just hasn't really drawn. I've always been kind of like, what was the point, really? I do radio every Tuesday, and I feel like, okay, but that's a good place for me to reach a lot of people. But then after I had this meeting with my friend, I was like, wow, it's not just about what do I feel like doing, it's about I have an obligation. If this is my gift, if my gift is I speak light into people, we need to light up the world, right? And especially when we live in this world where there's just so much disconnection, like we spoke about earlier, there's so much getting online and feeling depressed from what we see because we just constantly see the lack. We constantly see someone who has more than us or is more than us or does more than us, or we see these influencers who are like, if you don't get up at 3:30 and run 7 miles every morning and then have a ice plunge and then you get started with your day at 6:30 and then by 7 you've made your first $100,000 of the day, and it's like that is just not most people. They just don't have access to this. So I want to be able to create a space where people come and they actually feel uplifted and they feel like, hey, there's actually something that I can do with my life that could make a difference, right? Yeah. So I think I'm gonna do that. Yeah.
I think you should. I mean, especially if you feel like that's your calling and maybe you monetize it, maybe you don't, maybe there's some extra benefit of it. There's the fine line too. Now, some people do newsletters and then they give through their newsletters, and then in turn, maybe they pick out a chosen few for clientele. I grew up in a church where my grandfather was the pastor and my grandmother was, they call her the first lady of the church.
Mm.
I think they gave way too much. Like when
Yeah.
I say give, oh my God, like money, time to the point where I think it kind of caused strain on the family.
Mm.
And some of it was just like an open door all the time. It's not
Mm.
like, the Catholic Church, if you're a member there, a paying member, if I'm correct, I think you can go and do I don't know what it is. My wife is Catholic. And you go and do the confession, right? But they have money to make that happen. Like, building is not just there for free. They have money to make that kind of stuff happen. So
Mm.
I think there has to be some kind of component or something somewhere else that helps sustain what it is that you're doing so that you can do it without being what I used to. You ever heard of this? There's a rapper back in the day called the Poor Righteous Teacher out of Trenton, New Jersey.
No, I don't know
You
him.
do. Oh yeah, look him up. I heard something like somebody. I saw something on YouTube the other day. The guy had like really good lyrics, but I think he had a song called Poor Righteous Teacher, or either he was a poor righteous teacher.
Hmm.
You don't be a poor anything. You don't want to be a poor righteous teacher. So you got to figure out. Yeah, you got to figure out some kind of way to make that happen. But I definitely think it would be useful to have. And maybe sometimes I think that's a way of weeding out the people who really don't want to be there as well. By having something that screens them at the same time. But no, I think you should do it. I think that'd be really good.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think
Excellent.
I want to create a community that is just open for people to join. But and then at the same time, I'm still doing, I do corporate trainings here, I do corporate coaching. So I do leadership coaching, I work with corporations. So they will still hire me, right? I'm still gonna get paid for doing the work that I do, and it's a very different experience having someone take you through a coaching journey or having where it's just more either one-on-one or groups that I take through a journey. It's a very different experience because I walk with them on their development journeys. Um, I also do a lot of just one-off sessions, one day or half day workshop where I work with a team. And
Mm.
the corporates will still have budgets for leadership
Okay.
development, right? They're not going to stop wanting to develop their leaders. They're if anything, I see that these, I mean, apart from obviously organizations that are experiencing huge cost cuts because the US has decided they won't fund the UN or USAID anymore. I mean, those
Mm.
organizations are obviously under a lot of pressure, but most corporates, they're going to continue to have budgets for this. So I'm not really worried about losing clients in that sense because they're still going to want to hire me for these things. Um, but I just really feel called to have a place where, and I think also because a lot of people, especially here, they don't really have access to pay high level coaches the same way because of the currency, and in general,
Right.
people here
It's
make
true.
less than $100 per month, right?
What, USD?
Yes. And then you're asking them to invest in a $5,000, $10,000 course or something. It's like how? I would have to
So,
save up for 100 months without spending a dime in order to pay
so
for that.
hold $100 USD, but what's the cost of living over there? Can you live off of that?
So it really it depends. I would not be able to live off of that because of how I've set up my expenses. But some people are able to do that. But then they usually are in a community where they have, their housing paid for or covered. They live with their families, or they have a house that was handed down from generations, or but it's rough. It's rough, and so you're dealing with people where, I mean, it's obvious not everyone. Some people have significantly higher income, but a big part of the country and the continent, they don't have access to pay for the type of coaching that, so even a thing like a $300 challenge or a $50 masterclass can be a struggle, right? It can be really, really difficult. And I feel like I would love to have just a space where people can just come in and learn and ask questions. And I can't guarantee that all questions will be answered, but I just feel like I really feel drawn to create a space where it's easy for people to just come in and get support or have this experience of, hey, I can actually see how I can change my life. So
So you're coming from a place of compassion. You're not looking at it to monetize. So yeah, that's a whole different ball game that you're doing there.
yeah. And not,
Because you,
it's not that I never want to monetize anything, or like I'm still gonna have my coaching programs, I'm still gonna have my corporate trainings, but I feel called to create a space where it's just you can just come and learn and experience just being lit up, right? It's like without drugs, right? Just let's move away
right.
from the drugs and go get into personal development instead.
No, but you know what though? That you're so right about that because most of the people, most of the products that we sell are to either people in certain parts of Europe
Mm,
or North America, in Canada, things like that. But we're definitely not targeting everybody because you're right. Like most people can't even afford it when you're talking about 5, 10, 20, $100,000 products. It's like that's for a certain group or select group of people.
mm,
So yeah, no, you're right. That would be good if you can open that up to to everyone as much as you possibly can, and then let people graduate themselves up where they
yeah,
can.
right.
Um, and that's definitely a numbers game too, right? I think the guy who wrote the book, F It or something like that, I forget, Mark Manson or something like that. I think he has like some kind of online programs that cost like $20, and I was like, damn, why? How does he make money? But he has like freaking millions of followers, so you have 100,000 people paying you $20 a month. I'm not saying that's the exact cost of this program, but I know it's relatively low. He's already made a ton of money from his books and other programs. But when you're at scale like that, I think you can really impact a lot of people. And
Mm.
if you're talking about opening it up from the door, who knows? You may be helping 100,000 people before you know it.
Imagine. Yeah. And even if it's like 10 people, I think I would be happy. Because it's just, when you know that and I think sometimes we get so stuck in the vanity metrics that it's like, oh, but if I don't get enough people, if I don't get enough eyeballs, then it's just not worth it. And I feel like when you have your gift, you should share your gift no matter how many people are looking. And even in just doing the work of sharing, you're also owning your skill, right? You're developing that skill of just getting better at supporting and serving people. So I think in the beginning when I first started content, I was like, ah, well, nobody's engaging anyway. Well, nobody's watching anyway. So why even bother? And it's like, I just can't come at it from that energy because if I'm already feeling entitled by the start of my journey, then how am I going to stick with it, right? And then it comes back to who are you going to be as a human being? And we spoke about before, are you the kind of person that quits or are you the person that doesn't quit? And for me, I just
Mhm.
quit content real quick because I was like, who cares? Nobody cares.
Right.
I'm not even gonna. And I just
Mhm.
when I had that conversation with my friend and she mentioned those words so many times and I went home and I wrote it down like you speak light into people. That is an obligation, you know?
Right.
The gift
Right.
of being able to speak light into people, it feels so powerful. And it's like, how dare you keep that to only your friends? That does not make
So,
sense.
so is that like is that your way of giving tools to people who have their own Goliaths that they're fighting in their life?
Yeah, and I mean, I think just uplifting people in general. I think this world is in need of better role models. I think so instead, not just who am I going to be as a role model, but how do I help people become the kind of role model that they wish that they had, so that we're not driven by a world that's just constantly, like you're saying, transactional. So it's not constantly, how does it look? So it's not constantly, how am I going to act on this pedestal? And instead, how do I lead my community in a way that uplifts the world? And I think so much of the hate that we see in the world today, because there's just so much of it, I think it really comes from a lack of personal development. And it's so easy to judge people and say, oh, you're bigoted and you're this and you're hateful. And and when we're saying these things, all we're doing is just deepening the divide because we're choosing to not see their humanity because we only see their hate. And it's like, but why were they hateful in the first place? It comes from
Right.
a lack of
Right.
personal development. So how do we solve it? Do we cast blame and shame and judgment and guilt? Or do we choose to see the human and do we help them, light up? Because people who are feeling that light from within, people who are happy, people who are grateful, people who wake not just from their gratitude journal, but who actually feel a sense of gratitude for being alive, for having access to looking at butterflies and have, families that are supportive, the same way that we spoke about earlier.
Hmm.
It is
Hmm.
so hard to fill your heart with hate when it's already full of gratitude. Do you know what I mean? So I just feel like, how can we create more of a movement towards acceptance and seeing each other and supporting each other and being the kind of leader that creates this world where there's love and acceptance and just an opportunity to be beautiful leaders, you know?
I guess I would say action. You got to be doing it. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Do you watch the Diary of a CEO? I've seen like a couple of his shows with Stephen Bartlett. And now that you say that, I mean, I guess that's his way of giving. He's doing these interviews where people are giving out just a lot of really good information.
Hmm.
And in turn, just he's probably been doing it for so long now. I forget what exactly how long he said he has been doing it, but he's been doing it for so long that now he's just reaping all these benefits from it, buying up all these different companies, becoming a partnership. Now he's like on the business side of it even more so. But that is a form of giving. You're on YouTube and you're constantly just giving, 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 giving. Well, people come back to you and say, "Hey, can I give you something back, or what can I give from you? How can I help support what it is you're doing?" So, you know what? I think I may start giving too. I may join you in that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. See? Now we've started working on an extra role model.
I have to be. I got to be careful how I give because I got some serious experiences that people in business need to know when it comes to dealing with banks, when it comes to dealing with banks in the payment processing space, when it comes to dealing with the law firms, whether they be in the payment processing space or not, dealing with sales rep staff. I'm finding a way to, because this is America may not be like in Africa or where you are, Rwanda, but it is such a litigious space. It's not even funny. Like like if you're, I think some attorneys sue because hey, they need to make some money some kind of way. So let me just sue. Like if you're an attorney, if you're a litigator, you make money off of lawsuits. If you're not suing anybody, how are you making money? Right? So you may even have to think of ways to sue people, right?
Yeah.
So am I right? So you have to like really think about that. So I think that that's a great idea that what you're talking about, and I think I would like to join that. I just have to figure out a way to share the stories without necessarily quote unquote calling people out because it's really not even my job to call people out. People are going to. There's some groups of people they're known for being shady and unethical. Like that's just their culture. Period. And nothing will ever change hundreds and hundreds of years of doing certain things a certain way. So why would I even try? And
Mm.
that's not my calling. That's not my job. I'm not the judge, the jury, and the executioner. So my job is to just share my stories. Like when people read the Bible all the time for stories,
Yeah.
right? They don't know anybody in the Bible. Like we don't even know if people existed back in the Bible. To be honest with you, like no evidence. Let me not go there. But there's stories that teach lessons, and then you can go further than that and go to all the Kemetic stories, or pre-Arabic Egypt, where you have all these stories and hieroglyphics and things like that teach all these different stories. So who's going to tell our stories? Like, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. Trump doesn't want any black history in the schools or whatever they're saying. And maybe they don't want Chinese history as well. I don't know. But I know that they're removing certain information out of the schools. That's history. Those things teach lessons so that we can move forward a lot better in the future. But then who's going to teach the stories that you know about? Who's
Yeah.
going to teach the stories that I know about?
Mm.
And these stories have little gems in them. So I think that I'm going to become a storyteller.
Yes, please. And I think you're so right. There's so many. Removing history is a tool of manipulation and control and power. Right. So you mentioned the Chinese. During the Chinese Revolution, they destroyed a lot of books and antiques and just, even there's a movie, I think, I don't remember what it's called, but I believe it was with George Clooney, and they were part of a group that needed to try and preserve the art that the Nazis were trying to get rid of, because there's so much history in art as well. You know, they're depicting things that happened, destroying history books. So when you want to control the narrative, you have to get rid of all of the symbols of the stories, right? So that is art, it's books, paintings,
Mm, mm,
poems, even research, right? So
mm.
what the government in the US is doing by removing books from schools, by removing history from museums, it's a tool to try to get people to forget.
Well, not all. I don't think they're. I think it's the black museums they're affecting.
Even the
I don't.
Smithsonian.
Yeah, I don't. But I don't think they're doing that to like Jewish history or anything like that, or even like I guess like different like Caucasian history. I think it's just specific things like from what I understand, like to talk about like slavery and stuff like that.
But
So I,
imagine removing slavery from history. What that is,
mm,
in Denmark, where I'm from, there was a statue being built at
mm,
one of the canals. It was of a black woman who was a slave in the Caribbean. I think it was called something like Queen Mary, and that was in remembrance of a rebel in one of the um, what do you call it? Plantations? Is that what you call it?
hmm.
In the Caribbean, which was owned by Denmark at that time. And she was a slave of the Danish government. She was just not in Denmark, but she was brought to Denmark to be imprisoned after the rebellion that she caused. So she stirred
Oh.
up a lot of stuff, right? And they built the statue. And when they built the statue. So many Danish people came out and said, "Oh, but we never had slaves."
Hmm.
And it's like, well, we never had slaves in Denmark. We didn't bring them to Denmark. We brought them to the colonies, and people are like, what are you talking about? We had nothing to do with, and yeah, we Denmark had a lot to do with slave trade. And people don't
Hmm.
remember that because it's not something that we talk about. It is not something
Mm.
we were taught in schools. And if we did, it was run through so quickly that nobody really noticed. And we would be walking around in Copenhagen and see all of these beautiful buildings and churches and theaters. And all of this was built on the money that was created from slavery. And then
Mm.
we like,
Hmm.
that when we do talk about Danish involvement in slavery, we're like, oh, but Denmark was the first country to abolish slave trade. I was like, yeah, but you were also one of the last ones to actually implement it. It took, I
Mm.
don't even remember how many years, but it was like generations of, okay, so we're saying we're getting rid of slave trade, but then the children of those slaves and the children of those slaves are still not free because it took such a long time to actually implement the ban on slave trade. And we don't talk about
Mm.
it, right? We're always talking about Denmark as being this incredible country with this incredible history. And oh, but we've always been taught we were some of the really bad guys and nobody knows. And when you talk to Danish people about it, some people will just bluntly disagree and be like, no, that didn't happen.
You know, it's interesting you say that because I think that remember how you said that people who like are bottled up, we often express ourselves. We find other outlets that may not be that healthy,
Yeah.
and I think that is probably. I don't think it's fair, not to just the people or the descendants of those who were enslaved, but I don't think it's fair to the people because, like, being misinformed is like you're just uneducated,
Hmm.
so you won't even be able to appreciate your level of growth as a country or as a group. Yeah, you made some mistakes, but like look how you came out of it, and look how much people can learn from understanding. Oh my God, people really felt like they were so superior or so capitalistic that they would now find a way to like literally make money off of people's pain and misery.
Hmm.
But now look at us today. Like it's so bad that we don't even want to be connected to that. I that that educational piece that they're pulling out of America, I think it's just going to make more people um, more dense upstairs, right? You're going to be talking to people who are so ignorant that it's going to be almost impossible to have an intelligent conversation with them. They're
Mm.
not going to have any sympathy. They're not going to learn from the mistakes of others. They're going to end up repeating those mistakes based upon the ignorance that's passed down. So I just think that it's going to have a boomerang effect. You know, they say history
Mm.
always repeats itself, and I think the reason history repeats itself is because you don't know. Like if you saw somebody walk into, if you saw somebody play with fire and they freaking burn themselves, that's like a hell of a lesson. You will not do it again.
Hmm.
But what people do who don't know about that history of arsonists, right? When you see children playing with fire, obviously they haven't seen other people play with fire before, right?
Yeah.
Right? Or you see bullies who bully people. That bully has not seen another bully get the hell beat out of them before.
Mm.
Otherwise, they more than likely would not do it again. Just like when you train, that's why I was saying sometimes I think we have humans have five senses and so do animals, right? And when you train a dog, you some people train a dog by, hey, if you use the bathroom in the house, I don't know what they do. They pat him on the butt or whoop him or whatever. I don't know what they do. They do something. I used to see people mush the dog's nose in the poo poo and all that other kind of stuff. And people have different ways of training dogs. But the thing is, you're using history to train them, right? If the dog does something, and then hey, this is you see that dog, don't do it again. Here's how not to do it again. But if you take history out and just imagine walking into a business and then after 6 months, there's no financial information, there's no KPIs, there's no records of anything. How do you even know how the business did? How do you just, oh, I got $1 million. How?
Yeah.
Right? Or $500,000. How? You have no clue. So I think that's a bad move, but hey, I'm not the leadership. And, and if you're saying that's what happens even in Denmark, I know a little bit about the history there and that whole the transatlantic slave trade, but it's just unfortunate when you have people that are misinformed in that sense. And then the victims, they probably all bottled up inside and feel like nobody's like, there's certain groups that get reparations all the time, right? And I
Mhm.
think one of the things I have to take my hat off to, I'm taking my call right back. One of the things I have to take my hat off to with uh, Jews is that they have made it their mission to ensure that that freaking Holocaust never, ever, ever happens again.
Mm.
If you look at even the superhero movies, right, you can see the Holocaust in there. It's everywhere. It's
Mm.
in the Bible. I mean, they talk not in the Bible. It's in the religious stories. It's in education. You already know it's all over the media, and they do a great job of educating their people to ensure nothing like that ever happens again.
Mm.
So, and they're constantly talking about the history of it. And I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong, but I think that we should all become just a little bit more educated in terms of what has a person gone through to get
Mm.
where they are, whether it's the Chinese community, the Spanish community. I'm pretty sure there's some incidents that happen in Denmark. When you take it to the business level, what have your staff members gone through? Like when women, like they think, oh wow, they're having a bad day today, and they may sit down and ask you, oh wow, how's your day going? You know, and just sit down and kind of get you to talk about all the different things that happen. Whereas a guy, you know, he'd be like, I don't care what happened. Man, this is what you need to do. And what
Mm.
happens to that person? They don't get a chance to express themselves. They don't get a chance to open up. They become bottled up until something explodes.
Yeah. Yeah, and when something explodes,
So
you end up having a very short term staff, right? Or at least there's a short term strategy when it comes to just telling people, oh, just push it through, you'll be fine. Just do it anyway, just push it through. And when you do that,
yeah,
it's almost like, do you want, it's the conversation around immediate gratification versus delayed gratification. Do you want to sit down and have this conversation right now so that you can have a happy person that has a like healthy mental and emotional health, that will want to stay with the organization for a long time because they feel seen and they feel cared for, and they feel like they're actually important as a human being, not just as a robot, right? And also when you have neglected staff, that tends to spread. I think it's in the book called The Diary of a CEO, actually, Stephen Bartlett's book. He talks about how
Have
it's
you read that book?
yeah, yeah, it's a good book. I think in that book he talks about how the negativity of one person needs four positive people to outweigh it. So if there's three people
Damn.
in a room and they're happy and they're talking and they're having a good conversation, and then one negative person comes in, the whole conversation is going to get negative, and you're going to negatively impact those people. It takes at least four people who are positive before the impact of the negative person doesn't influence them. So it's just
I need 12 people around me then.
what?
I need 12 people around me then.
Right. Yeah. But the point being, if you don't nurture your staff, if your staff becomes, if they feel neglected, if they
Yeah.
feel not taken care of, if they feel like there's not a way for them to express themselves to you, they will express themselves to their colleagues in the corridors. And what's going to happen now? Their colleagues are negative, right? And then they're going to spread their negativity. And before you know it, you just have a very unhealthy culture of people that are just not feeling great. And every
Right.
time you bring something to the table and say, hey, how are we going to go about this? They're all just going to cross their arms and they're going to, I don't know, you tell me. That's the attitude that you're going to meet. So is it worth it telling
Right.
someone, oh, just suck it up and figure it out? Because it has such a big impact on the whole company culture. It has such a big impact on how this person influences their colleagues and how they influence their colleagues.
Mhm.
So do you want to take that, would you want to put the energy into, hey, let me actually see you, let me talk to you, let me make sure that you feel good where you are, right? Let me make sure that you feel seen and
Mhm.
taken care of. And it creates such a different dynamic in the organization when you do that.
You know what? You're right, and that could kind of go into the whole David and Goliath thing because one thing that I think Goliath, he had all the this is just the story. I'm not saying David and Goliath happened. I'm not saying it did, but the story that I've seen or read about growing up as a child in church or seeing on the TV this big gigantic Goliath. I don't know if it was allegorical, like this big problem you having, or if it was like an actual freaking human who was. I don't know how Goliath was he supposed to be 8 feet tall, 12 feet tall? I don't know. And then you had who had all this armor and all the weapons and everything, and then you have David who has like the slingshot,
Yeah.
right? So when I just thought about when you have a David and a Goliath, one has way more resources than the other, and so if you're so right, if you have a smaller company, especially, and you're going on, let's say you have, your company makes, I don't know, 10 million, you got another company making freaking 200 million. That's a Goliath versus your David. So your team, you're going to need your team to be something more about than just dollars,
Yeah.
right? They have to be in it. Like, and that's a whole, I mean, of course they want to be compensated. There's a whole bunch of other factors that go into this, but you are right in terms of like, how are people communicating with themselves? In some cultures, like we had some VAs who were from the Philippines who were working with us at one time, and they don't necessarily communicate the same way. It's like a totally different culture.
Mm.
They don't smile as much, they don't laugh as much. Like you don't know if it's AI or if it's a human, right? It's
Yeah.
like sometimes it can be hard to detect. You have to kind of pull out, but they do communicate in their own culture. And they may be talking amongst each other. And you're right. I've seen it happen where one seed or one was planted and it just kind of turned into like this cancerous type of thing.
Mm.
And it's like how did that even come about? But first of all, they weren't communicating to begin with, and you have to pull it out of them. But let's say you step outside of that culture and you come to the American culture where people overly communicate, but if they're not allowed to, it still becomes a cancer and it becomes a part of the culture. So, you are right about that. Being able to express yourself and being in a place where you can. Also, people are all, they want the kind of culture where I had a staff member who told me people stay at your company either because they're being compensated a lot or they feel something that there's something bigger at the end, maybe like they can get some kind of equity or something like that. And then maybe you have a few others who are don't mind like a blend. I forget what book that was that I read. I don't know if it was Deep Work or I forget some book I read when they were saying it's not either one of those. It's another book. I can't think of the name of the company. Something Camp or something like that. And they were saying that they didn't pay as much as other companies, but because people felt like some kind of something bigger than just the paycheck, and they were able to communicate and express themselves, and you could have time off and different things like that that people didn't take advantage of. That's how they were able to thrive. And I think they're a very successful financial company at this base camp. I think that's what it was called, base camp. And so I remember reading that book. So no, you're right about that. You're right about that. I'm going to take that into my whole David and Goliath kind of ordeal scenario at the same time.
Yeah, and I think we see it more and more, especially in the younger generations, that they're less concerned about paychecks, like the amount on the paycheck, and they're more concerned about, am I having impact in my work? Do I feel like I have impact through what I do? Do I feel fulfilled? Do I feel like I'm part of something that's important? And also, is there flexibility in my work hours? And will I be able to have a bigger impact on the kind of work that I do? So I know so many people actually who have recently said no to another job that was twice their salaries, but it was the kind of job where you would have to, like, fight and compete, and it was like, that kind of energy, and there's no feeling of impact. They did not care about the vision of the company. It was all about, like, how can we push others down so that we can get more. They're like, I'm just not interested in that. I'm not interested in a job that just is going to drain me and make me feel unfulfilled, and that's going to not accommodate my needs, and it's not going to see me as a human but more as a robot. So more
Mm,
and more
hmm.
people are less concerned about the amount on the paycheck, and they would rather buy into something that is like, I want to be part of the mission and the vision of this company. I want to make sure that we impact people the way that this company is impacting people. I want to make sure that when I go to work, I feel like the work that I do means something, apart from just a paycheck. So that's also one of the reasons when I work with organizations, a lot of the attention goes into, what is the vision of this company, and how do you describe it? Because so many people, they're like, oh, I want to write up my vision, and I'm going to post it on my website, and then once per year we're going to do one-on-ones, annual reviews. We're going to test people if they know what the vision is, and the employees are at home memorizing the vision before the conversation. And that's pretty much what it is. But the vision is such a great
Hmm.
tool, because if you make the vision something that's emotional and something that people want to be part of, then the vision is can be the reason that you attract better talent because they want to be part of it. It can be the reason why you get more investors because they believe in what you're trying to do. It can be the reason why
That's
you
so true.
partnerships, right? It can be the reason why people stay, you have higher retention. It can be the reason why people want to
Okay.
buy from you instead of somebody else, right?
Yeah. No, that's a good point. You know what? That's a really good point because you're talking about attracting talent, attracting investors, in like what makes a small company, let's say like a smaller company like ours compared to companies that are making $1 billion a year. If we have the same products and services, what differentiates us? Nothing. People, I don't care how pro black they are or pro white or whatever, they are going to go with what benefits them more. And in this case, in America especially, it's all about the green dollar bill. So even when clients make their choice, like people, I hear a lot of people like throw the fists up and we got to do this together, the power fist, right? But then when it comes to the money, it's just green,
Mm.
right? And they always go with what benefits them more. And so if you have a much bigger company that can give more, that can do more, they may even charge more. But because they can do more for that person and people are selfish, they always think about themselves. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Your potential client is going to choose somebody else over you if you don't have a bigger mission. Maybe some will go with you because, like you said, you do have that mission. We want to help 1,000 people become financially successful. We want to help feed 1,000 families. We want to help this. We want to help do that. People, I think, like you said, they want to do something that means something besides just a dollar bill.
Mhm.
We're a payment processing company. We stand next to Stripe. Stripe gets freaking millions of dollars of just investment capital. There's a white labels. I don't know if they show white labels or Stripe, but like WAP, they're a white label of Stripe. At least they were. Fan bases are white label of Stripe. They receive millions of dollars of funding. I don't know what their mission is. They're white labels of Stripe, but millions and millions of dollars of funding. And maybe the people who are behind them are looking for a bigger payout, but they also get access to a lot of other tools that an actual direct payment processing company would not have access to. And so when you have all the clients that are out there, potential clients, they're going to choose the company that could give them the most, right? Which is a way like that's like a court that's like almost like a corporate war. I remember, let's say if you have like the bookstore in your neighborhood, right? And then you have Amazon online who can now sell the same book that you have in your store for say $15, they can sell it for 10. Where are people going to go? They're going to go to Amazon and basically put that particular small business out of business. You know, you can even have some people have so much money they can buy a particular author's book, right, at wholesale prices, and then put it online for freaking $100 markup so that people won't buy it. And you have other people who are thinking like, okay, why would I go to a small bookstore versus going somewhere else where I can get that same book for 50% off, right? Not realizing that they're actually hurting themselves because if you help businesses in your community, it may provide more jobs. You know, there's more tax dollars. There's a whole bunch of other things that happen as an effect. But if you go to Walmart or the Amazon, like the freaking giant, that's not necessarily helping your community. It may be helping you individually. So you just made a good point. Why would like what mission statement or what mission does that particular small bookstore have
Mm.
versus Amazon, the freaking giant?
Yeah, and I think there's
What?
actually there's an opportunity for small bookstores to get creative in terms of creating experiences more than just the product. Because the thing is also if you have a commodity, right? Meaning that if I sell something and you sell the exact same thing and your price is lower, we're gonna go with yours because it's cheaper. Because mine is the exact same, just more expensive. But when you have a small bookstore, I saw the other day, there's a bookstore in London that has started cooking meals from the books. So you would be it's almost like a restaurant. It's kind of a restaurant, but there you don't have a menu. It's like it's a three-course thing, and it's from a book that we have, and then we're gonna talk about the book, and you're gonna get to eat the food. But we're not gonna take any dietary restrictions. We're not gonna do any accommodations in any sort. But you get to have the experience of eating what is in mentioned in the book, right? So they're creating an experience around the books. So the focus is still on the books, but they're creating an experience around it. So, and I think we see it more with, people like browsing, right? Just walking around and looking through the books and holding the physical copies. They like to be able to sit down at the cafe. If you make it a really cute cafe, that has blankets and hot chocolates and that has a story, oh, this hot chocolate is inspired by the hot chocolate from the Hobbit, or I don't know if there's a hot chocolate in the Hobbit, but you can create this experience. Sometimes you go into a book. I was in a bookstore in, I think it was in Dublin, and they had this wine bar at the end where you could go, and it was just decorated in such a beautiful way, and it creates such a beautiful cozy environment that you see this bookstore, you just want to walk in there. You want to be a part of that vibe, right? So you're right. If it's just a bookstore, the only thing that we're focusing on is selling books, people might as well go to Amazon. But if you're creating an experience, then Amazon can't compete because it doesn't have a physical place for you to, you'd have to create that experience at home. And now you're responsible for the experience.
So
So
that's how David fights Goliath. And that makes
yes, yeah, you make it more like you increase the value. If your competitors are reducing the price instead of reducing the price as well, because then you'll go out of business because you can't hold the same profit margins, then create more value, create experiences, create a story, make people want to be part of something, right?
You know what? That's such a good point. That is definitely another way. That's a good David and Goliath thing because I think that's what makes the story with David and Goliath so interesting. Anyways, how this little guy, the way they made him look on TV, you know, with the, I don't know what he had on, some gown or whatever he had on. How does this little guy with a slingshot, the story that I remember seeing as a child in the Bible story, my grandparents used to always watch these stories where everybody. The thing that turned me off about those TV stories is that I used to always say, "Damn, we're all are there any black people?" Like I used to always, that would be the thing. I'd be like, "Isn't that in Africa? Like, isn't Israel in Africa? Like, I know they separated it and things like that with like man-made demarcation points, but I'm like." And anyway, that's the thing that used to always like bug me out. Like, hey, where is this at? Like, right, it's not in Europe, so where was it? But I also seen one story of David and Goliath where Goliath had like this sword and took it. Did you see that? And he like hit David and it went through him. David pulled it out. And yeah, it was crazy. I'm telling you, the stories go, oh my God. And that's what gelled with me. But it kind of gave me courage. I'm a little scrawny guy like David was. David took the slingshot, bam, like killed him. So I shouldn't say that word, but he unalived him now. Is what they say, right? He unalived him. So you're right. The story, like what kind of story, what kind of experience are you giving people that makes them remember something?
Mhm.
And like how can you fight the Goliaths in your industry? Matter of fact, how can you fight the Goliaths in your own life? So no, that's good stuff. I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, and they say that people don't remember what you say, they remember how you made them feel. So if you can make people feel something, you will always win over the people that. How much feeling do you really get through sitting through Amazon and just you can get the excitement, the dopamine hit of clicking purchase and then standing there waiting by the door until it comes, and then you get the excitement when you're opening, but that memory is so we're not going to hold it for a long time because it's duplicable, right? It's the same experience every time until it kind of stops being the same experience because now we've done it so many times. But if you go to
Yeah,
the local store and they give you the experience and you get to taste something that's beautiful and there's a smell, right? That we have our senses stimulated. We can touch something, we can hear something.
right.
How are you working on the whole experience? Um,
Do
the
they have
music.
bookstores like that?
They have very few bookstores in Rwanda, but one of them that they have is connected to a really nice cafe where you can sit, and it's a beautiful experience.
The
But the thing
bookstore?
about Rwanda is that if you want to buy something from Amazon, you pay more than the price of the product in shipping. And a lot of the things that are being shipped from Amazon does not ship to Rwanda. So there is still a lot of access issues. There's still a lot of additional costs. We also have, duties, customs on anything more than like $200. We have to pay, I think it's 18, 20% to up to 25, depending on what the product is. So it's just still price wise, there's not a lot of competition from Amazon still. So, but one day we will have, right? One day they're gonna fix
Yeah.
all of that, and it's gonna be much more easy to be able to access the products on sites like Amazon, and then it will impact the local businesses, right?
Yes. Well, this has been good. This has been good. This has been good. I
This
hope
has been
that.
just look at it. This has been 2.5 hours, Kaz.
Oh wow. So, you know what? You right. I have a call at 1, but this I'm hoping that people can benefit from this.
Mm.
Like I didn't even like if we ever have another conversation, I'm going to write down some things that like some tactical things that people can use to help protect themselves because like if you don't know, let's say what you don't know can't hurt you. But in the corporate world, like we all sign agreements and documents and things like that. That
Mm.
stuff can really come back
Right.
and hurt you big time. And even if you're starting a business and you have salespeople and you have staff members, like like some of your staff members will come in and they will steal your data. They will steal you, right? And you have other cases where you may have staff members come in and they learn things and they may hold the. I had a risk analyst come in and no matter what, he would not document anything. Like he just would refuse to. And I had to pay $30,000 to even hire him. In the HR firm that I used to hire him, they still wanted to get paid regardless of how bad this guy was. He even made us lose like a couple $100,000. Plus, he would not document anything. He wouldn't tell anybody anything that he was doing
Mm.
because that was his leverage, right? I've had other staff members to come in and do similar things, and you know, trying to get in contact with them is like trying to contact, the president or something like that. You just cannot get in contact with them because that's their leverage piece. So the SOPs and the KPIs, all these things are like super important for you to have in your business. So if we ever have this conversation again, David and Goliath 2, whatever you want to call it, then we're going to give David some more tools so that he's better prepared to help fight Goliath.
Mm. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah,
Cool.
thank you for this. This has been fun. I feel like every time we talk, I'm surprised of how time passes.
Good. That's good. That's good. I'm
Yeah.
glad it was fun. I'm hoping it's useful at the same time. Send it to me. I love to hear. I probably won't listen to the whole thing, but I just want to. I really hope that it helps people.
Mm.
I know that's what you want to do.
Yes.
Uh, I can't go back and change the past of anything that happened. I can't even necessarily. I don't know what's happening in the future, and there's so many aspects of this quote unquote entrepreneurial thing
Mm.
that I think people can be way better prepared to handle. Who's your friend today may not be your friend tomorrow,
Right.
right? Who you think is your ally may not be your ally tomorrow.
Hmm.
How to, what kind of attorneys to look for, what kind of business partners. Oh my God, that is so important to
Mm.
partner with. What kind of financial institutions? Like the people, it's like people, when we think about institutions, we think about the name of the brand that we see, but who are the people behind it? What's their history? What's their culture like? Like, do you know who you're really getting in bed with? It's extremely important to know. So, hopefully we can provide people, like I said, we give David and Davita, isn't that how you say it for a female? David and Davita, we could give them some more tools so that
Yeah.
they can be better equipped to deal with what possibly like the blind spots. I think is what hurts a lot of us.
Right. It sounds like a good idea. I think we should do that. Cool.
Cool.
Thank you so
All
much.
righty.
And I'll see you next
Okay.
time. I'll let you go. You have a meeting shortly, so we can reconnect soon and set that up.
Okay. We
Okay.
will. Thank you. Well,
Thank you. Have a good one.
too now.
Bye.
Okay.